Good evening. The meeting will now be in order. Please silence your mobile devices. And I see that there is a sufficient number of voters present to allow us to open the meeting. This evening, we will continue with the annual town meeting warrant, beginning with Article 28. Once again this evening, the gymnasium is the only venue for the meeting, and voting will take place only in this room. To vote on tonight's articles, you must be occupying a seat in the gymnasium. However, live coverage of the meeting will be broadcast in the cafeteria so that those who are taking a break there may follow along. I'd like now to invite Fire Chief Tom Judge to come and tell us what we need to know in the unlikely event of an emergency. Chief?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Just a couple of safety announcements. The gymnasium is equipped with 4 exits, one in each corner. The one to my left and your right is, the sign is obstructed, but where you see the dual county league sign, that is an exit over there. In the unlikely event of an emergency, if you are using the child care, we would ask you to just proceed to the outside where the child care staff will be waiting for you with your child in the courtyard outside of the auditorium. The final thing that we would ask is that we try to keep the aisles and rows clear, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. On behalf of the meeting, I want to thank Fire Chief Judge, Police Chief O'Connor, and both of their excellent departments for their service to us during town meeting. We also owe a big thank you once again to the town meeting team, Town Manager Chris Whalen and his staff, Town Clerk Kari Tari and her staff, Public Works Director Rich Rain and his staff, Technology Director Mark Howell and his staff, and Boston Light and Sound, who are providing the equipment in the hall, and CCTV, who is recording and broadcasting the proceedings for us this evening. But the blue ribbon thank you goes to Town Meeting Coordinator Heather Brissett, who in her first year with us has done a terrific job orchestrating it all. Thank you, Heather. On Monday night, the meeting elected Ms. Carolyn Flood of 1289 Main Street as Deputy Town Moderator, who will take over the duties of the moderator if she is unable to fulfill them. The Deputy Moderator has been sworn to the faithful and impartial discharge of her duties. I want to introduce our elected and appointed officials who are at tables at the front of the hall. To my left, at the first table, are the Select Board, and further over is the Planning Board, and to my right, at several tables, are the Finance Committee. The Selectmen, the Finance Committee, the Planning Board, and many other boards and committees have burned a lot of midnight oil, understanding and analyzing the issues before us tonight, and you will hear their recommendations on the articles as we take them up. You will also find the FinCom and Select Board recommendations on the articles in the front of the Finance Committee report, which is available on the tables in the cafeteria. Finance Committee report looks like this, and it also has the entire warrant, all the articles in the back. That report, by the way, is worth spending some time with, and I encourage you to do so. You will find it to be an excellent window into our town's current and future financial situation. If you've not yet stopped at the tables in the cafeteria to collect materials for tonight's articles, you will want to do so. Some of the articles will be moved as printed in handouts, and many of the articles are further explained by information on the table. You'll also find a green booklet entitled Town Meeting Traditions and Procedures, which is a procedural guide for this evening. And if you do have questions on town meeting procedure, I invite you to consult with our able town meeting resource person, Joanna Glazer. Ms. Glazer is seated in the front row, and she is waving. Thank you, Ms. Glazer. You'll find her over by microphone 3. There is also out on the tables a questionnaire on town meeting that I very much hope that you'll fill out for us. We're particularly interested in how you have found the physical arrangements for town meeting and how useful you have found town meeting information on the town website. And in addition, we'd very much like to know whether you have found the closed captioning of the meeting that has been provided on either side, on the screens on either side of the podium, by the indefatigable Stephanie this evening. We'd love to know whether this is a thing you'd like us to continue doing. There's a box in the cafeteria for completed questionnaires. You may also send them in later. And there's also an online version of the questionnaire on the town website if you'd prefer to fill it out and submit it there. The town is always in search of citizens willing to donate their time and talent to the conduct of town affairs. And immediately after town meeting, many boards and committees will be in need of new persons to fill seats. And if you are interested in working directly on issues that affect the town and getting to know your community better, I would invite you to fill out one of these, a green card, to volunteer. The annual town report is also out there, and every board and committee in town is in there if you're interested in learning more about the committees and boards available to see what might match with your interests. You'll also find green cards available to fill out on the town website, www.concordma.gov. I have appointed Mr. Abe Fisher of 400 Hayward Mill Road to be head teller, Mr. David Carr of 82 Lawsbrook Road to be ballot supervisor, and Richard Wells of 368 Lawsbrook Road to be assistant ballot supervisor. Mr. Fisher will supervise a standing counted vote if we require one, and Mr. Carr will supervise the counting of ballots should the meeting vote to take a vote by ballot. Mr. Fisher, are the tellers ready to be sworn?
We are.
Mr. Carr, are the ballot counters ready to be sworn?
We are.
Excellent. Tellers and ballot counters, would you please stand and raise your right hand? Does each of you swear that you will faithfully and impartially perform your respective duties at town meeting this evening? I will. Thank you very much. And on behalf of the meeting, I offer my gratitude, our gratitude, to Mr. Fisher, Mr. Carr, Mr. Wells, and each and every one of our tellers and ballot counters for taking on this role. And please don't forget to count your own votes if we're calling upon you. All voters should have received a voting slip when they checked in. It's a different color every night. Tonight, it's some crazy kind of neon yellow. Your voting slip is what identified you as a registered Concord voter and enables you to vote. It's a great idea to write your name on it. And incidentally, in the event that there is a vote by ballot, you would use a piece of this for the vote by ballot. So it serves those two purposes. Tonight we have some visitors and we welcome you. Each visitor should have registered in the cafeteria and received a visitor badge. And visitors should sit in the visitors section that's marked at the end of the bleachers closest to the door unless they have permission from the moderator to sit somewhere else. We also have with us this evening Town Council Mina Makarios of Anderson and Krieger, and council will be invited to address the meeting if we have a legal question. We have a preliminary motion to begin this evening's session. Ms. Hotchkiss moves that if the meeting does not complete its business tonight, that we adjourn and reconvene to complete the warrant at 7 p.m. on April 12, tomorrow evening, in this hall. Is there a second? I see that there is. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? The motion carries, and I so declare. And we will now turn our attention to the town meeting warrant. Once again, please be sure that you've silenced your mobile devices. I will ask all of the presenters on tonight's articles to note that their prearranged presentation time will count down on the clock on the side of the screen, and that the lights on the podium will flash when time is running out. Yellow when there's 30 seconds left, and red when there are 10. I will ask that everyone do their very best to adhere strictly to the time limits that they have this evening, because we do have many articles to cover. When we open the floor for comments and questions, please approach a microphone. They're all at the front of the hall. State your name and address when your number microphone is called. Microphone number 6 on my far right is an accessible height, and it may be used by any speaker. Finally, please remember that tonight we are a legislative body with a moderator presiding. Your questions and comments are made on behalf of the Assembly and should be addressed to the moderator, not to the speaker at the podium. Every speaker from the floor will have 2 minutes, and the clock on the screen will track your time too. One final word before we begin our deliberations tonight. As a community at town meeting, we want to balance full and fair discussion with reasonable and efficient use of our time. While we do want to be sure that the meeting is well informed before it votes on an article, we also want to avoid repetitive debate that sheds little new light on the issues that are under consideration. So please think about these community values and goals before you rise to speak and before you move the previous question to end debate. We'll now take up Article 28.
I'm Pam Rockwell, 1810 Main Street, speaking for the 2229 Main Street Oversight Committee.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rockwell. The motion is on the screen. Do I have a second for the motion? I see that I do. Ms. Rockwell?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Article 28 appropriates $25,000 to create a redevelopment plan for the property at 2229 Main Street in West Concord. This is money for planning, not for taking ownership of the site. The property at 2229 Main Street is 46 acres nestled in Thoreau Hills across Main Street from the ice rink near Forest Ridge Road and the Acton Stop and Shop. The site is zoned for light industrial and residential uses. It was previously at the site of Nuclear Metals, Inc., also known as NMI and StarMet, a defense contractor that worked with high-tech metals, and it's now a Superfund site. You might remember the big factory buildings on the hill, 3 shifts a day of the assembly line, but almost $100 million has already been spent cleaning up this site. To quote my favorite Jedi, everything you know might be wrong. Even before it became a Superfund site, all of the contaminated sludge in the old holding basin was dug up and shipped away, leaving only a tarped hole in the ground. The most serious risk to human health at this site was gone in 1997. In 2001, the site became a Superfund site, and during the first investigation, barrels of beryllium shavings were discovered. And by 2005, they were dug up and shipped away. StarMet used to store drums of uranium metal and waste lined up in their hallways. In 2006, all of the metals being stored in the buildings were packed up and shipped away, gone. After a small fire in 2007, the Concord Fire Department inspected inside the buildings and pointed out some problems. EPA did a quick clean out of all the hazardous chemicals inside the buildings, and in 2008, they began the process to remove the buildings at the site. Our fire department is truly awesome. In April 2015, town meeting voted to take ownership of the site once EPA required that it be cleaned up to be safe for all residential purposes. And in September 2015, EPA did just that with their record of decision. And by the end of 2015, all these buildings were gone. This is what the site looks like today. Flat, open spaces. Can you go back one? That's it. That's what the site looks like today. The water cleanup started last year. The pump and treat system is actually in Acton on the site of the old gravel pit behind Stop and Shop. So what you need to know now is that the risks at this site have been largely eliminated, and final risks are being taken care of by the implementation of the EPA record of decision. This site is going to be a safe place to work and to live and to play. What's left? Excavating the slabs and some soil to make sure that the property is safe enough to grow vegetables, and surrounding the source materials that are too deep to dig up with concrete and capping it so that it will never contaminate the groundwater. Now our old problem site is an opportunity. EPA is negotiating the funding contract called a consent decree. As soon as the consent decree is signed, remediation planning starts, and the site could theoretically be cleaned up in 6 years. The consent decree could be signed tomorrow. This is why we need to create a redevelopment plan for this site right now, to show our commitment to the property without taking ownership before the soils cleanup and containment begins. To encourage the remediation design to include our own plans for our site restoration. This site is going to be cleaned up and someone is going to redevelop it. Our select board is a little hesitant to take ownership of this site before the groundwater protection systems are put in place. But planning the redevelopment shows our commitment to becoming effective stewards of this site. And EPA wants there to be a responsible owner for this site who can make sure that the underground containment structure is not disturbed. The Pentagon took 3 years to sign the consent decree for the building removal and only signed once the site had been abandoned by StarMet. We don't want them to have any excuse to put off the rest of the cleanup any longer. Creating a redevelopment plan now lets EPA know that we are committed to being good stewards of the site, so they will encourage funders to sign on the dotted line and get on with the cleanup. And what if the consent decree is signed tomorrow? The remediation design would begin. A reuse plan can inform the remediation design so that access roads and containment structures can be placed in convenient locations. Remember the difference in the cost of capping the old landfill next to the high school if we wanted to park cars on top of it? Well, if the town wants to park dump trucks on top of the old holding basin containment structure, then the structure can be built resilient enough to pave and park trucks on top of it. We won't have to go back to EPA and ask them to make a sturdier cap. Remediation can be planned so that certain parts of the property are even available for immediate use, like hiking trails. Is $25,000 enough? Well, our comprehensive long-range plan has already identified a lot of our town needs, so now we just kind of have to pick what we want to do with the site. This is a $200 million cleanup, and the Army is footing most of the bill. So $25,000 really is just an organizational amount of money. And the Environmental Protection Agency will provide a contractor to help with the redevelopment planning. This site is in the heart of a vibrant residential neighborhood. Potential uses include a transportation center, solar power generation, recreation buildings and fields, town offices, housing, nursing home facilities, or other commercial or educational purposes. In summary, if we develop reuse plans for the site now, we can encourage a quicker cleanup of the site, and we can leverage the restoration of the site to make our redevelopment easier. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rockwell. Both the Select Board and the Finance Committee recommend affirmative action on Article 28, and I believe that we will hear from Mr. Ng of the Select Board.
Good evening, Madam Moderator. Stephen Ng, 12 Dalton Road, member of the Select Board, speaking on the Board's behalf.
Mr. Ng.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. The Select Board unanimously recommends affirmative action on Article 28. An article passed by the 2015 town meeting authorized the Select Board to make preparations to acquire the nuclear metals StarMet site. Since that authorization, the Board, with the guidance of Town Council, has been working with the EPA to clarify questions regarding the issues, the process, and the appropriate timing on when this authorization can best serve the town of Concord. The creation of a site redevelopment plan by the town is now needed to share our vision for future uses of the site, and Article 28 shall provide the funding of such a plan. Our plan would assist the EPA in ensuring their final cleanup details are coordinated and prepared to support our designated uses. It is also important to note that the EPA has offered additional funding to facilitate the creation of this plan. The Select Board has approved a nuclear metals StarMet Property Reuse Planning Committee charge to oversee the redevelopment plan process. The committee shall include representation from the 2229 Main Street Committee, residents who have land use planning experience, a representative from the West Concord Advisory Committee, affordable housing group representation, and of course, citizens at large. The committee will provide a plan and process on how they shall fulfill their charge, as well as a schedule for public hearings and interim reports back to the public and the Select Board. It's quite an extraordinary opportunity, isn't it? To have the opportunity to create a town vision for the future of a 46-acre site right in our own backyard. Endless possibilities. The site, which is roughly the size of the Boston Common, can enhance many goals cited in our long-range plan, be it open space, nature trails, recreation, renewable energy, a dog park, community local services, housing, town department facility needs. The Select Board would like to initiate this process, and we'd like to invite those interested to join us. The Select Board recommends affirmative action on Article 28. Thank you.
Don't forget your green cards for that committee. We'll now open the floor to questions and comments from citizens. Microphone number 5.
I'm Timothy Rose, 97 Bartlett Hill Road.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I am head of the Technical Advisory Committee of CREW, the Citizens and Environmental Watch, and I'm speaking for the committee. The committee strongly recommends that the town approve Article 28. Beginning in the late 1980s, CREW has advocated for the cleanup of the nuclear and chemical waste at the Nuclear Metals StarMet site. CREW played a significant role in its addition to the National Superfund site in 2001. Since that time, the Technical Advisory Committee, along with its consultant from GeoInsight, funded by CREW's Technical Assistance Grant from the EPA, have followed the progress at the site. We attended regular joint meetings with DeMaximus, who is conducting the cleanup, the staff from the EPA, members of the 2229 Main Street Oversight Committee, and representatives from other towns, state, and federal organizations. This group reviewed the progress at the site and made suggestions on future directions of the remediation. DeMaximus determined the extent of the contamination, submitted a plan for remediation of the site, which was approved by the EPA, and supervised taking down the buildings. Cleanup of the soil and water and stabilization of the contamination in the holding basin is beginning. The committee feels confident that the 46-acre site will be cleaned up to a level that will allow multiple possibilities for development by the town, ranging from recreational use to municipal applications and even possible development for future housing. Article 28 authorizes funding for the town to create a redevelopment plan for the land. Passage of this article will demonstrate to the EPA the town's commitment to begin evaluating possible future uses. Passage of the article will provide the EPA with additional support in its negotiations with parties responsible for funding the cleanup. Finally, passage of this article gives the Concord community an opportunity for input on the development of a large parcel of valuable property in West Concord. Please vote yes on this article. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 3.
Terry Ackerman, 89 Heathsbridge Road.
Ms. Ackerman.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I have 2 related questions. What guarantee is there that the cleanup will really remove all of the hazardous material from the soil and the groundwater? And in the event that the town is sued in the future or whatever, what is the town's, what are we doing about the town's potential liability?
Thank you. Ms. Rockwell, would you like to address those?
So this site has been studied for well over 20 years. We know a lot about what's there. So we can be sure that what we know about is going to get removed as part of the cleanup or contained as part of the cleanup. But I do want to point out that science is only as good as the question to ask. And for instance, there is a solvent that's heading under the river right now that was found after the cleanup plans were originally set up. Technology improved. We could test for this solvent, and now we are cleaning up that solvent at the site, or the contractor is cleaning up that solvent at the site and preventing it from going under the river. So that's actually one example that the people that we're working with, EPA, the Army, the principal responsible parties, are actually pretty good actors in this situation, and they are willing to do the right thing. The other thing is we have wicked good lawyers. So basically, you can take ownership of a Superfund site and not take ownership of any of the liability. Now, if we were to cut through the cap of containment, we might have some liability for that. But if something new is discovered, that liability will always remain with the principal responsible parties, the biggest of which is the Army. So really, it's a matter of our lawyers doing a good job, and they've done that in the past. And that's happened at many Superfund sites, so there are plenty of ways to redevelop them carefully.
Thank you very much. And I think maybe on the legal question, we'll ask Town Council to just come and tell us a little bit about the good lawyering.
Madam Moderator, Mina Macarius, wicked good lawyer. Ms. Rockwell generally described a few of the ways that the town would be protected. The town currently is not an owner of the site. It had no usage of the site, so it has no liability at present. If the town were to purchase the site, there are a number of protections that already exist by statute for municipalities that purchase sites that did not have responsibility for any of the contamination, both under federal and state law. We would also likely seek covenants not to sue from EPA and the private parties to protect the town further. There are also other protections you can get, like environmental insurance. And the key, as Ms. Rockwell said before, is that the town would have to avoid undoing any of the remedies that are in place. So breaking through a cap or accidentally turning off a system that's actively pumping and so on. So obviously, as this goes forward, a lot of the attention will be to just how to protect the town given the long range of this site.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 2.
Jim Terry, 368 College Road.
Mr. Terry.
This is a little bit different, but I think the whole meeting here needs to thank the 229 Main Street Oversight Committee with the leadership of Pan Rockwell. They have done a tremendous job over a very long period of time bringing us to this point.
Thank you for that. We'll violate our no clapping rule. Microphone number 3.
Regina Ryder, 96 The Valley Road.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I have a question again about how you came up with these 25,000, because from what in my head, when I think about planning something, these plans usually cost well over $1 million. So I would like to know how this sum came up.
Ms. Rockwell, would you like to address that?
So we asked Marcia, and that's how we came up with the original number of 25,000. The Finance Committee said, well, what can you buy for $25,000? That's not a lot. But the reality is that we have already identified most of our needs in the comprehensive long-range planning. So we're not going to have to redo that. We're going to have to just look and pick and choose. And EPA provides a contractor literally to help organize the redevelopment planning process. So we can take advantage of the contractor that they provide, and really our $25,000 is for oversight of the other processes going on.
Thank you very much. And the Marcia referred to there is Marcia Rasmussen, our Director of Planning and Land Management. Thank you. Let's see, microphone number 4.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Jessica Harvey from 102 Pilgrim Road.
Ms. Harvey?
Thank you. I have to say, I just, in good conscience, cannot vote for this as it is written. I don't believe that people should be permitted on that property. If it were to be used as a bus depot or a solar farm or something, fine, but as it stands now with the opportunity of putting housing in there, I find that this is a bad idea. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing no one else at a microphone, I think that we are ready for a vote on Article 28. All those in favor of Article 28, appropriating funds for 2229 Main Street redevelopment, thank you very much. All those opposed? Okay, motion carries near unanimously, and I do so declare. We'll now proceed to Article 29. And when we get it up on the screen, okay, the motion under this is acceptance by the town of Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 90, Section 17, limiting traffic speed, and Mr. Whalen is moving this article as it is printed in the warrant. Do we have a second? I see that we do. Thank you.
Madam Moderator, Chris Whalen, Town Manager. I live at 1935 Main Street.
Mr. Whalen.
Article 29 requests that the town vote to accept Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 90, Section 17, which would lower traffic speeds on some Concord roads. The 2016 Municipal Modernization Act, adopted by the Massachusetts legislature, granted cities and towns greater control over a wide range of issues, including municipal finance, procurement, and local traffic control. The new law allows towns accepting Section 17 to set speeds on thickly settled local roads at 25 miles per hour where the state had not already established a speed limit. In the past, the thickly settled speed has been 30 miles per hour. Cities and towns have the ability to opt in to Mass General Laws, Chapter 90, Section 17C, reducing the statutory limit from 30 to 25 in thickly settled areas and business districts. Section 17 defines a thickly settled or business district area as where the street is built up with structures devoted to business or where dwellings are situated at a distance of less than 200 feet apart over a quarter of a mile or more. It is important to note that the statutory speed limit only exists where in the absence of special speed regulations. Special speed regulations occur in those locations where the Commonwealth has acted to determine the speed limit, such as the 40-mile-an-hour speed zones on Lowell Road, Route 117, and some sections of Lexington Road. If a special speed regulation exists, the posted speed limit will always supersede the statutory limit within the thickly settled or business district. This slide shows that about half of the streets in Concord, it's a small, I apologize for that, have state-approved special speed regulations already in place at various speed limits, establishing a posted speed limit. Those roads not shown in color would be the ones subject to this locally accepted statutory speed limit. Why should Concord consider this local option state law? Concord's 2005 Comprehensive Long-Range Plan urged the Select Board to adopt traffic calming measures to slow the speed of traffic. Concord is located near several major state highways used by commuters, many of whom are not familiar with Concord residential areas. Traffic navigation apps such as Waze and Google Maps help commuters in a hurry cut through residential areas to avoid traffic congestion, sometimes at excessive speed. Finally, pedestrians and cyclists, Finally, Concord, like many communities, is exploring ways that we can make our streets safer for pedestrians and cyclists to support healthy activities and to increase community connectivity. This list shows the communities that have accepted this local option provision in the short time since it was approved, and including communities of Arlington, Bedford, Lexington. I believe Carlisle has it on their town warrant for later this month. I recommend your favorable action on Article 29.
Thank you very much, Mr. Whalen. Both the Select Board and the Public Works Commission recommend affirmative action on Article 29. And we'll open the floor to questions and comments. Microphone number 5.
Richard Follander, 399 Old Bedford Road.
Mr. Follander.
Madam Moderator, thank you. I live on Old Bedford Road, and most of you would be aware that it is a busy street. I'm also an avid cyclist. Well, I used to be more avid than I am now, but I did ride my bicycle here. Did anybody else ride their bicycle here?
I did not.
Probably not. So you can see where I'm coming from, which may be good or bad in your view. But I feel like initially, yes, it sounds great, we're going to lower the speed limit, but we're not really lowering the speed limit on any significant streets. It's basically neighborhood streets, which is great. But I think that the town should take a more active role, and I hope the Select Board will see this as a first step toward making speed limits more rational throughout the town. Lexington Road goes from 35 to 40 to 35, and it's 35 when it's pretty thickly settled. So I hope at least in thickly settled areas, which you have to admit is an awesome term, because I grew up in Ohio and I never heard of it till I moved here 40 years ago or whatever. In any event, I think the town, the Select Board should take some kind of role, the Public Works, to look at thickly settled areas and ensure that those areas that are appropriate get to 25. It's really confusing that if you're thickly settled in one area, it's 25 and it's going to be 30 or 35 or more in another area. Second, I think the town should also just look at general ways to reduce speed. Speed limits are not really limits, they're minimums. And if you go the minimum, you're going to be tailgated, at least I am. Speed limits, you will not get a ticket unless you're going 5 miles over the speed limit, at least. So a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit is really 35 and on up. So I think in terms of police enforcement, everything else, it's hard to give a ticket if you're going only 4 or 5 miles over the speed limit. As a cyclist, people careen by me at the speed limit and beyond, and as a driver who tries to stay around the speed limit, again, I think we've all experienced the fact that people almost want to run you off the road. So in any event, thank you very much. I hope that the town will see this as a first step toward providing, as was mentioned, safe streets for both pedestrians and cyclists. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further questions or comments on the floor on Article 29, it appears that we're ready for a vote. All those in favor of Article 29, please raise your ballots. Thank you. All those opposed? I see that that Article 29 carries by well more than a majority, and I do so declare. We'll now proceed to Article 30. Now, just a word about these articles. Article 30, 31, and 32 are the marijuana trilogy this evening. And the first one would ban marijuana entirely. The second one would tax it if we're going to have it. And the third one would give us a little more time to think about it, our zoning regulations for it if we're going to have it. So we do need none of these. Sometimes we have alternative articles like this where a vote on one in favor of one will obviate a vote on another. In this case, we need to vote on all of these articles. The ban will, in addition to a 2/3 vote here on the floor of town meeting, also require a vote at the polls afterwards, and you'll hear more about why that is later. And so the planning board, even if the ban is accepted, would still like to have its zoning article for a little more time put forward, even if the ban is adopted. So we will vote on all 3 of these articles. And we have the motion under Article 30 here. This is the bylaw amendment to prohibit all types of non-medical marijuana establishments as defined in Mass General Laws, Chapter 94G, Section 1. And we will hear first from Mr. Considine.
Madam Moderator, I just wanted to clarify your remarks. It's not a ban on marijuana entirely.
Thank you very much. It's only on.
Sorry, Jennifer.
Yes, that's correct. It's
Okay.
only on non-medical marijuana. So it's only on non-medical and recreational marijuana. Thank you for that correction. Thank you for the point of order.
I think we should, well, hopefully our sponsors will clarify the language that's being used because it's not a ban just on non-medical marijuana. So.
Marijuana establishments. Yes. Okay. Yes, you'll clear it up. All right. And do we have a second for the motion? I see that we do.
Thank you. I'm Ray Considine, 133 Nursenack Hill Road, Chair of the Board of Health, and speaking for the board tonight.
Dr. Deborah Green, 341 Madison Drive, member of the Board of Health, and speaking for the Board of Health tonight.
And I'll also say we have, the Board of Health has asked for an additional individual, Dr. Eden Evans, who is a resident of Concord and an expert on addiction, to speak with us also. And so you can bring her up afterwards and she can have an additional 3 minutes. So, Mr. Considine, you may proceed. Well, that's Mr. Considine has 3 minutes, then you have 4, and then Dr. Evans will have 3.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Article 30, as you heard, is a proposal to amend the town's general bylaws by adding a new section regulating marijuana establishments. In November of 2016, Massachusetts voted to legalize the adult use of marijuana. As a result, marijuana establishments will automatically be allowed in all cities and towns that voted for legalization, and that would begin July 1st of this year. Concord voters approved the use of recreational marijuana by a margin of 193 votes, less than 2% of the 11,257 votes that were cast that day. If we wish to opt out of allowing retail sales and related businesses, we must vote to do so by amending our general bylaws at town meeting, and we must take a second vote at a special or at a town election for the bylaws to become effective. Article 30 would prohibit the retail sales of any form of marijuana product, as well as prohibit cultivation, manufacturing, and other licensed uses. Article 30 would not affect residents' ability to possess, grow, and use either medical or recreational marijuana as allowed by state law. Each adult may grow up to 6 plants in their primary residence and up to 12 plants per household for personal consumption. Adults can possess up to 1 ounce outside the home and 10 ounces inside the home, and none of those provisions will be affected by this article. The Board of Health recognizes that legalization is a complex issue with a wide range of public opinions. We want to share our concerns with you tonight so you can decide whether you want to go forward with allowing marijuana sales or limit them in some form in Concord. The current regulations will allow, if we let them beginning July 1st, they'll allow for pot shops that sell marijuana products, pipes, bongs, joints, edibles like candies, cookies, gums, beverages, as well as smoking accessories. Vape shops that sell marijuana-based vaping liquids and vape pens, and retail food stores that sell edibles, supplements, or marijuana-infused lotions and oils. In fact, any retail establishment could potentially be licensed to sell marijuana products. It's likely that in 2019, the Cannabis Control Commission regulations will allow bars and cafes devoted to social consumption of marijuana, as well as coffee houses and restaurants to sell edible marijuana products in addition to their regular food and beverage offerings. By voting to opt out now, Concord will avoid the prospect of these and other types of businesses opening in town. Dr. Green?
The Board of Health believes that adoption of Article 30 is important because public policy has outpaced the science of marijuana. The data from states such as Colorado and Washington is limited, and the research is evolving, but what we know today about the effects of legalization is concerning. Colorado, which was the first state to legalize marijuana in 2015, has seen an increase in hospitalizations, visits to emergency departments, calls to poison control centers, and accidental pediatric overdoses related to cannabis use. There's also been deaths of family pets. Edible products constitute a significant part of this market in Colorado and are involved in about 40% of the calls to poison control centers in that state. There's substantial evidence of a statistical association between cannabis use and increased motor vehicle accidents. Traffic deaths in Colorado before marijuana was legalized were 10% related to cannabis use. After legalization of marijuana, traffic-related fatalities due to cannabis use were 20%. Unfortunately, this is an area where, again, public policy is ahead of science. Law enforcement currently do not have a rapid roadside test, like an alcohol breathalyzer test, to determine if someone is driving under the influence. While we recognize that many adults could use cannabis safely, there are definite risks. There's moderate evidence of a statistical association between cannabis use and anxiety, depression, and suicidality. Also, we should be aware that the addiction rate is much higher for adolescents than it is for adults. We need to be concerned about our adolescents. Their brain is in a crucial time of development. The prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision-making, impulse control, and emotional maturity, does not finish this development, this maturing, until about the age of 25. It's this process of synaptic refinement, myelination, and the final laying down of receptors that's so at risk when exposed to substances like cannabis, alcohol, and opiates. So we want to keep adolescents and young adults away from cannabis at this time. Some people might argue that the sale of legal marijuana is restricted to those people over the age of 21 so that there's little risk to our youth. However, the sale of alcohol and tobacco is also restricted to those individuals over the age of 21. And our town's own youth risk behavior survey makes it clear that high school students have access to and regularly use alcohol and tobacco. Society spends significant public health, financial, and medical resources to reduce the use and health impacts of alcohol and tobacco. It's taken over 20 years of hard work denormalizing the use of tobacco and to reduce smoking rates. By normalizing the use of marijuana in our community, we group it with substances like alcohol and tobacco, which in and of themselves pose health risks and have impacts on public health and safety. So the Board of Health asks, why would we normalize the use of another drug, marijuana?
So to conclude, the board has serious concerns about permitting non-medical marijuana establishments in Concord. It's still an evolving area. In the future, we will gain a better understanding of those health concerns as states with recreational marijuana continue to inform our understanding of it. In addition, there's a growing body of research on the health effects from the National Institutes of Health, the National Academies of Science, and other institutions. And in time, we'll also gain insight from other Massachusetts towns that choose to offer recreational marijuana. We don't think it serves Concord well to be on the forefront of this issue today. Many towns throughout Massachusetts have already opted out or are also in the process of doing so. At the same time, opting out does not limit a resident's ability to possess or grow marijuana at home for personal consumption. The decision to opt out is not a permanent one. And with better information in the future, Concord could always choose to opt in at a subsequent time.
Mr. Considine, you're almost done, right?
In light of what we know and what we don't know, we urge caution by opting out of licensing retail and other uses of recreational marijuana. We stated our concerns, and now it's up to you as voters to decide whether to allow retail sale and production of marijuana in Concord. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you wish to bring Dr. Eden Evans now, or did you? Yes, that'd be fine. Sure.
Thank you very much. Eden Evans, 684 Sudbury Road. I'm a professor at Harvard Medical School and founding director of the Mass General Hospital Center for Addiction Medicine. We study medical marijuana for sleep, anxiety, depression, and its effect on cognition and brain structure. And we study the effect of marijuana abstinence on teen learning. I'm in favor of Article 30, and this is because we know that repeated marijuana use in adolescence can cause lasting changes in brain function that jeopardize educational, professional, and social development. But the effects of a drug on individual health are not determined only by its biology, but by its availability and its social acceptability. In this respect, it's the legal drugs, alcohol and tobacco, that account for the greatest burden of disease associated with drugs. Not because they're more dangerous than illegal drugs, but because their legal status causes more widespread use. Since legalization, Colorado now leads the United States in teen marijuana use. Throughout the United States, the states that have legalized marijuana have significantly higher teen use than those that haven't. And here I mean ages 12 to 17, not the supposedly legal over 21. A full commercial market that we're contemplating today, brings advertising, free samples, attractive packaging, together with convenient availability and social acceptability that's so important for teen use. And these will increase, and we've seen that they've done so in Washington and Colorado, the number of new marijuana users, as well as increasing the dose and frequency with which marijuana is used. And so, what people may not know is that flower marijuana potency has increased 9-fold since the 70s to 18%. And common today, which were unheard of years ago, are waxes and oils that are over 80% THC. And increased potency increases addictiveness. So 1 in every 16 who uses marijuana will become addicted. And almost half of those who use daily will become addicted. Heavy daily use in teens is associated with an average permanent IQ loss of 8 points. Even occasional teen marijuana use is associated with physical brain changes. I can show you pictures from our own research group at Mass General. And weekend-only use in teens impairs learning for a full 2 weeks. This means that regular weekend marijuana users have impaired learning throughout their entire high school careers. So we know now that in Colorado, middle and high school suspensions have increased 34% since the recreational marijuana market opened, from about 1,700 a year to about 2,400 per year. So because of this human cost of creating a full commercial market for retail marijuana with pot shops locally, particularly for our young people, I'm strongly in favor of Article 30. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The Select Board recommends affirmative action on this article, and I believe we will hear from Jane Hotchkiss, Chair of the Board.
Good evening. I'm Jane Hotchkiss, 1479 Main Street, member of the Concord Select Board and speaking for the Select Board. Thank you.
Ms. Hotchkiss.
Just in case anyone is still unsure, as the moderator has explained, these 3 articles all relate to whether town meeting will vote to allow the cultivation, distribution, and sale of recreational marijuana in Concord. And if so, what other policies related to such sales we would want to approve. As a member of the Select Board, I approach all 3 from the perspective of the best interests of Concord's residents in keeping with the historic scale and character of our retail spaces. And just again as a reminder, what isn't being debated or voted on, the choice to use or grow marijuana for individual recreational purposes or the use of medical cannabis. This is about retail. What is being brought forward tonight are 3 articles that will put us in the best possible position to respond to voters' interests in marijuana sales, distribution, and cultivation. Let us all remember the recreational marijuana industry is in its formative stage in Massachusetts. The question the Select Board considered was whether we wanted to be an early adopter in this new industry, or would we want to go slower and watch how the industry and the retail markets develop before jumping in. And thus we begin with Article 30. Here, as we've heard, the Board of Health proposes that we pass a ban on retail marijuana, and they have made a clear case on the health and societal risks associated with its use. If passed at town meeting tonight, the language moved would be brought word for word to the ballot for a municipal election, and if passed then, it would allow Concord to opt out from cultivation, distribution, and sale of recreational marijuana. This article received robust discussion by the Select Board, resulting in a 4-to-1 split vote for affirmative action. And I think I speak for the majority of the board in stating that it is our belief that the risks in being an early mover outweigh any perceived benefits. Concord does not have much to gain in this first year of a new law when regulations are still going through hearings and the waiting and watching may be a better approach for us all to take. It is also worth reminding again those at town meeting that should we decide to opt out tonight and this passes at townwide election, this can be brought forward to this body again for further discussion once the industry has matured and perhaps public opinion as well. It's all about timing. Sometimes being first is an advantage, but patience, not my strong suit, may allow us to learn from other municipalities. The Select Board recommends affirmative action on Article 30. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now open the floor to questions and comments. And before we start, I want to say 2 things. The first is that I've been asked by our technical folks to remind everyone to position themselves fairly close to the microphone when they're talking so that you will be audible not only in the auditorium but in the broadcast for folks at home. And the second is that Town Council, our really good lawyer, has alerted me to the fact that I misspoke on the quantum of vote necessary on Article 30. This is a majority vote, not a 2/3 vote. Okay, let's see. Microphone number 1.
Thomas Lange, 38 Shore Drive.
Mr. Lange.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I was a practicing psychiatrist for almost 30 years and saw many people with mental health problems, depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia. I just want to put in a statement to emphasize how unhelpful the use of marijuana is for people that have these problems. I won't add too much to the experts that have already spoken, but one additional point is that people often overlook that marijuana is usually used as a combustible form and does not differ from tobacco in many respects in terms of the carcinogens that it conveys to the lungs. So in addition to being a threat to the cognitive and emotional maturation of the youth of Concord, it also is carcinogenic. This is less well appreciated, but I'm sure it will turn out to be so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 2.
Good evening. Heather Bout, 33 Alden Road.
Ms. Bout?
I'm a member of the Concord School Committee and Concord Carlisle Regional School Committee, but not speaking on their behalf.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Just as an individual and someone who is very involved with the schools, I wanted to voice my support for this article. I won't repeat all of the points, but to hear so much data behind the harm that this could do to youth in terms of cognitive development, the potency increase, the addiction potential. As someone who is very involved with these schools and students, it concerns me to think about the effect that it could have on teen learning here. To have a campus that has many students with open campus who could conceivably be walking, riding, and driving, depending on parking, into town to get access to these things. I know that one of the contradictory points is that it will be accessible in other towns, and that is true. But I'd like to echo Dr. Green's point that the more we normalize it and the more we create access, the more we could be helping to create a problem. So although this is not a referendum on legalizing, obviously, I'd like to reiterate that we should not further normalize it in Concord by making it accessible to teens who, yes, will get access. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 3.
Thank you. Garrett Whitney, 296 Heathsbridge Road.
Mr. Whitney.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. So I'm not speaking for or against this motion, but I want to actually make an amendment. My apologies. There's a class of marijuana-derived products which does not produce a high, which is not subject to abuse, which is not medical in the sense that it's not prescribed by medical professionals, sort of in the sense that my business, something called Rolfing, is not medical, although I treat chronic pain generally successfully all day long. This class of products is generally called the CBD oils, and people take it, people in Concord take it for, in a variety of forms, from capsules to liquids to vaped oils, which give less of the lung problems that you described. Anyway, this is a commonly used product in Concord. It's sold in Concord legally by establishments in Concord, and the language, as I read it in the proposal, doesn't make it clear that this product is exempted. So I put together a very simple amendment, and I hope it won't cost us much time. I think it's, well, we'll see. There it is.
Thank you very much.
Should I read it or no?
Well, it's on the screen,
Okay.
so I think that it's clear. Do we have a second for the amendment? We do. Thank you. And I'm looking at Town Council to see if he has a point of view on whether this is in order as a matter of law. Just to give that doesn't mean it's out of order, but we just should have the information.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. The statute that established the ability to have marijuana establishments or to prohibit them speaks of what towns can do to prohibit types of marijuana establishments. It does not allow towns to pick and choose types of marijuana that can or can't be prohibited as a type of product itself. This additional language would only be valid to the extent that it continues to be consistent with what the Cannabis Control Commission, the state regulator, views as outside of the definition of marijuana, which by statute and by regulation excludes oil from the seeds of the marijuana plant, but not oil from the rest of the plant. So, long way of saying, as long as the Cannabis Control Commission agrees that this is not marijuana, this would be valid. However, it could get struck by the Attorney General on review because towns can't pick and choose products. They can only pick and choose types of establishments.
Thank you very much. We now have a motion to amend Article 30, and we have a second, and so our discussion now will turn entirely to the amendment. So, anyone at the microphones on the floor, if you wish to address the amendment, please speak up. Microphone number 1, amendment? No. Microphone number 2, do you wish, anybody in the line at microphone number 2 wish to address the amendment? No. How about microphone number 3? No. Microphone number 4? Microphone number 5?
Ann Hayden, 342 Sudbury Road.
Ms. Hayden.
I have a question about what the lawyer just said.
Brilliant. Come on back, Town Council.
Am I interpreting what he said that if this amendment were passed and were put in, that the state's lawyer, the Attorney General, could determine that because we were not dealing with an establishment, we were dealing with a kind of marijuana, that it would cut down the whole article, which would mean that we wouldn't have passed it, and thus retail establishments would be able to open on July 1st or whatever that date was.
Thank you.
Madam Moderator, that's an excellent question. Typically, the Attorney General will excise only the portions of the text that they need to bring it into conformance with state law. So I would expect that the Attorney General's office, in their review of the bylaw, would if they believe that this was outside the scope of what the town could do, which I would say is a gray area to begin with, they would just strike that language.
How good is your typically?
Well, he's a pretty good lawyer.
Right, we established that. I'm not going to live that down. I am not aware of any other town that has tried to make this distinction. However, the Attorney General has now reviewed many bylaws in towns that could prohibit it with or without ballot votes, and they have approved the language that shows up in your warrant, and that's why it's there, over and over. So it would be highly surprising to me, let's say, if they did not just excise the language. They also typically do reach out, again, almost always, I should say, reach out to the town and to town council to ask what's going on with something, so we would have an opportunity to point out that the rest of the bylaw shouldn't be tossed.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 1, I see someone who'd like to address the amendment.
Ken Wilson, 242 Old Marlborough Road.
Yes, sir.
From my point of view, I would consider the CBD use to be medical, and therefore, why would we need to consider it under this particular motion?
Mr. Whitney, do you want to address that?
Well, it's a thought. I just don't know that that would be a legal ruling. I think that, for example, as the illustration I used is my business, which I practice every day of the week actually, is not considered medical. Doctors do not prescribe it, but it is health-related, strongly health-related, and I don't think that term is clear, actually, to tell you the truth. There's no clear exemption of these products in the law as written.
Do those patients of yours have medical marijuana cards?
My business is not marijuana.
I will remind you to address your comments to the chair. Thank you very much. I know you're all very well-intentioned, but we'll try and keep the dialogue here.
So I have no relationship to marijuana as a business whatsoever. My business is an alternative form of physical therapy called Rolfing. It is not medical, and if I make medical claims, I'm actually subject to censure, which I do not do. I think that there are gray areas, particularly in our medical system, which tends to define things which are paid for by insurance and prescribed by physicians as medical and other things as not. The CBD oils are not. Therefore, I'm making the assumption, and it is an assumption, that they fall between the cracks and that the language needs improvement.
Council, is this an issue you can elucidate for us, or? You can just stay up here if you want.
Just a reminder on the overall scope of the article that the prohibition would apply to medical marijuana, excuse me, let me back up, not to medical marijuana establishments, only to marijuana establishments that require licensure from the Cannabis Control Commission in the first place. So to the extent that natural food stores that sell hemp products or any retailer that sells any other product that doesn't require licensure from the state, that nothing that the town does would affect it one way or another. The state has just issued its regulations, and they're in the process of being applied and interpreted to all those kinds of establishments.
Thank you. Microphone number 3.
Ruth Lauer, 100 Kais Road.
Ms. Lauer.
Question on the amendment. Should the amendment pass, does that mean that the establishments that we are speaking of in the main article could only sell these oils? Or does it mean that these, however these oils are now purveyed to the public or to the therapist, will continue as they always have without reference to this main article?
Mina, can you help us with this one?
Sure. Could you pull back the article just so we could?
Yes,
the main motion?
absolutely. Could we have the main article back? Well, you know what, it actually, it's not helpful because it moves it as printed in the warrant. I can give you the warrant.
Well, this is still helpful. Again, the point is that the prohibition would be on non-medical marijuana establishments, as those are defined by state law. So this additional language, I think, frankly, wouldn't add much one way or another, because the state would be deciding what products can be sold and can't be sold in those. The only remaining residual thing that would leave is that it would allow the state to potentially license an establishment to sell only those oils. But again, from the state's perspective, marijuana establishments, non-medical, can sell the broad scope of marijuana products.
Okay. Does anyone else have a question or a comment on the amendment? Okay. Doesn't look like anyone does. And so we're ready for a vote on the amendment. And this will be a majority vote. So all those in favor of the amendment, please put your ballots up.
Sure, why not?
Thank you. All those opposed? Okay, the amendment fails. There's less than a majority vote in favor of it, and I do so declare. Okay, we'll now return to the main motion under Article 30. And let's go to microphone number 2.
George J. Corrett, 148 Peter Spring Road.
Mr. Corrett.
Madam Moderator, it'll be obvious why I had to say J. So I agree with all the health issues that were raised, but I think that the home grow operations have even more health risks. And I'll describe these in QQS: quantity, quality, and safety. So the quantity of home growers could be large. And there can also be criminal activity associated with home growers, such as breaking into people's houses because they have valuable home growing. Then the quality, home growers often use fungicides and pesticides in order to prevent the loss of their entire crop. And that's more like Massachusetts regulations have been very tight against the use of fungicides and pesticides. And some of these fungicides and pesticides are more dangerous, in my opinion, some of the organometallic type pesticides. They're more dangerous than the marijuana. The other thing is safety. people did talk about edibles being very important. So edibles, people extract the oil. They commonly use hydrocarbons such as ether to do the extraction. So you might have somebody in their basement with a saucepan of ether that they're boiling on a hot pot. Not the type of thing you want in your neighborhood. And so for those reasons, I think that I'd rather trust our government, local government, to situate these establishments in non-egregious places and to regulate it. And I think it's more dangerous if it's homegrown. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's see. I'm going to go here. Microphone number 4.
Dean Banfield, 73 Walden Terrace.
Mr. Banfield.
I'm a member of the Finance Committee, but I'm speaking for myself.
Thank you.
Madam Moderator, I have an amendment for which we do have some text, I believe. Okay. Sorry. How's that? My basic concern with this motion is the broad nature of it. We've had a lot of discussion this evening and 11 full minutes of advocacy for why it's a bad idea to sell marijuana in town. However, the proposed language will limit our agricultural community, which is quite robust in town, from cultivating marijuana. It will harm our possible development of testing facilities or any other kind of controlled facilities which are not retail. They do not end up in the hands of our youth who are at risk. So my amendment basically curtails the breadth of this motion so that we're really only talking about retail marijuana. And so I'm inserting the word retailer at the front end and then cutting out all of the other different kinds of things, because I believe that this gives an opportunity for these things to develop within Concord, which are really at there's no risk here to the town or to the youth or anything for having these sorts of businesses develop within the town. There's also the possibility of just, more commercial potential, which just enhances our tax base. To be clear, I'm going to, if this passes, I'll be happy, but I will be happier if the entire motion fails. So.
Okay, so first of all, is there a second for this motion to amend? I see that there is. Council, do you have any observations on this amendment in terms of its impact for us?
Madam Moderator, this would fit in with what I described earlier as prohibiting certain types of establishments and is within the scope of what the AG has approved in the past.
Has allowed in the past?
Yes, picking and choosing different types of establishments as defined under state law is okay.
It is allowed. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, we're now accepting questions and comments on Mr. Banfield's amendment, which is on the screen. And the amendment is to change the language in the warrant article motion, as you see on the screen. Microphone number 1.
Judy Zonbrecker, Border Road. I'm a member of the NIC, but I'm speaking on my own behalf.
Ms. Zonbrecker, yeah. Okay.
The one topic which hasn't come up and that even this amendment doesn't address is that a public safety issue has not been discussed, and that is because marijuana is not approved at the federal level. Anybody who's in any sort of commerce on marijuana has no place to put the money. It cannot be put into a bank because that would violate federal law. And so this would end up with, and the concern I have in general with retail establishments or any business establishments regarding marijuana in Concord is that there's going to be a lot of cash floating around, and that I believe could lead to either additional criminal activity or unsavory ways of that being managed. So I would vote against not only this amendment, but also I would vote against the amendment, but certainly support the overall ban.
Thank you very much. Anyone else like to speak to the amendment? Yes, microphone number 4.
Ara Avakian, 501 Powder Mill Road.
Mr. Avakian.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I'm in favor of this amendment. I attended a hearing on these articles in the auditorium some months ago and learned about the fact that the law allows Concord to pick and choose what kinds of establishments are forbidden if we opt out. And I think my feeling is everybody here wants to opt out of retail establishments in Concord. What I think this amendment does is it makes it stronger. It makes it more likely that we'll be able to successfully opt out. Remember, even if it's passed here, it's secret ballot when people vote in an election, the odds can change and it could go down. But by limiting it to just this, then the people who object to forbidding cultivation or a laboratory that tests marijuana, people who are in favor of that would vote against the, this article. So I think this article strengthens the goals that have been expressed tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak on the amendment? Microphone number 2.
Hi, Jennifer Clark, 96 Blueberry Lane.
Ms. Clark.
I'm the parent of 2 teenagers, and I also happen to be the Concord Carlisle Youth Services Coordinator, but I'm speaking as a private citizen tonight. As it relates to the amendment, I will be voting in favor of Article 30, and I have other comments related to that. But as it relates to the amendment, I would just like to point out that grow sites require extensive inspection of operational security and monitoring of the testing procedures of all the products. So the cost that these requirements would, would outrun the potential revenue Concord would take in from these marijuana businesses. I would also like to point out, as someone else mentioned, that our public safety and health inspection resources would be shifted to security, monitoring, enforcement, and inspection of marijuana businesses. I'm trying to imagine all of the open fields in Concord and kids not running through them, picking leaves off. So I really do want to point out the security and the monitoring piece of that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else have, yes, microphone number 5.
Hi, Libby Curtin, 143 Holdenwood Road.
Ms. Curtin.
I would like to speak in favor of this. I was taking a walk today, and one of my neighbors came up, and we were talking about this. And he said, listen, it's not fair to businesses. There are lawyers in town who are able to work on the marijuana business. There are graphic designers in town who can make money on the marijuana business. Why are we penalizing someone who wants to test it or who wants to, as I understand it, and I could be wrong, but I think the farming of it has to be done inside a locked facility. It can't be in a field. It's not out. Everything is contained. And I don't know that that's fair to other businessmen in this town or people who own facilities. I'm just saying, I think it's too restrictive. I agree that I don't want retailers on Main Street. I don't want retailers in town, but I also care about the business in our community, and I think we should think about them before we cut everybody out. So it's just a thought. I think we should think about it.
Thank you very much. Anyone else like to speak to the amendment? Microphone number 3.
Neil Ryder, 96 The Valley Road.
Mr. Ryder.
Thank you. I also would like to speak in support of this amendment. Whatever your opinion about retail sales, cultivation and testing is an entirely different business. Concord has a long, industrious tradition of agriculture, one that we're justifiably proud of. And I think this is a big opportunity for a new business in Concord that would bring in additional tax revenue. And as the previous speaker mentioned, this is entirely a rather high-tech industry that's performed exclusively inside. There are no open fields for people to go and raid. This is a secure facility. So I think we should support something which is potentially a valuable and growing industry in Concord.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 1 on the amendment.
Hello there. My name is George Patrick Corrett. I'm from 140 Peter Spring Road.
Mr. Corrett.
And I would like to go and speak in favor of this amendment because, yet again, it's all done inside. This is another source of tax revenue that we get without any of the risks that anybody has mentioned. And I think that's kind of a no-brainer.
Thank you very much. Anyone else on the amendment who's at a microphone? Microphone number 2.
Madam Moderator, my name is Brian Farber, 41 Ash Street here in Concord.
Mr. Barber?
Pleasure. Thank you very much. First of all, I think this is wonderful, by the way. We've often heard that public policy is getting ahead of science. I think we're also getting ahead of a fact. In January of 2018, there was an article in the New York Times that noted that Partner Colorado, a credit union founded in 1931, is actually taking payments of cash or taking payments from these stores. So I wanted, in respect to the previous speaker, maybe we're all looking at fake news. Maybe we're all looking at different sources of information. But again, I think public policy here today is getting in front of fact. And I think we should consider, do we know what we're talking about, or should we put a moratorium? So I'm in support of this amendment, but I'm also in support of a moratorium, but I'll speak to that later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 3 on the amendment.
Thank
Yes.
you. D. Ortner, 169 Thoreau Street. I have a question for clarification. On the sheet that was
Ms.
distributed.
Ordner, can you speak at the microphone?
On the sheet that was distributed for Article 30, there is what would be prohibited. And one of the things is an independent testing lab or independent testing labs. And I have 2 questions associated with that. Does it mean it has to be an independent testing lab that is only for marijuana testing? Or is it for every independent testing laboratory? And then I have a follow-on at the end. I know the answer, or I don't know the answer, but assuming there's an answer.
We'll ask Town Council if he can elucidate for us.
The term independent testing laboratory is a defined term under the state statute and regulations, and it's one that's licensed by the Cannabis Control Commission, so it has to do with marijuana, not all testing laboratories in general.
Okay, so are there then, how would testing be done if you're at the Emerson Hospital, an emergency comes up, time is of the essence, you need to have tests run, and are they permitted to test for marijuana use? Are they permitted to test to whatever is in the marijuana? How would that happen? What if the police need to have someone, they come up with a design of how they can test for driving under the influence?
Independent testing laboratories are special facilities that are for the purpose of conducting research and testing on marijuana products. So that does not apply to hospitals, the police department, testing that currently goes on today and may use update technology later.
So it's a very specific use, only pertains to marijuana testing, period.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on the amendment? Microphone number 4, and then I'll come back to 2.
Yes, Steve Allen, Wolf Pine Way.
Mr. Allen.
Question, Town Council. When I read this, it says the operation within Town of Concord of marijuana establishment has been struck, retailer has been added, as defined by Mass General Laws C-94G. Town Council, is establishment the word that's defined in the Mass General Laws? Retail, if it's being substituted by retailer, I would think that retailer is not defined. I'm supportive of Article 30. I would not want to see anything in the language here that's going to impact Article 30. So could you comment on the use of the word establishment versus retailer? Thank you.
Sure. Madam Moderator, both terms are defined in Chapter 94G, Section 1. A retailer is a subset of an establishment. It's one that provides to consumers. Establishments include all of the other categories here and a few others that aren't listed as well.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 2.
Ray Considine, Nurse Knock Hill Road.
Mr. Considine.
Madam Moderator, could we have clarification about the sales tax assessments on medical marijuana? I was under the impression that that only applies to the retail sales in a community, that 3% local excise tax.
So that's a question under a different article. How is that relevant to this amendment?
Well, there was a comment made that we would be losing revenue from not allowing these uses of the...
All right, that's a fair question. Town Council, can you answer that for us?
Sure. The local sales tax that you would be considering under Article 31 actually only applies to marijuana retailers.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 5.
Tim Rose, 97 Bartlett Hill Road.
Mr. Rose.
Part of my question was answered by the previous one on what an establishment or a retailer is. But am I to understand that if someone set up a shop and wanted to give this away free, he would be allowed to do that?
Council? We can give away water bottles.
I would suspect that, and I actually more than suspect, the Cannabis Control Commission would likely view the giving away of marijuana products beyond that amount that could be used for personal use as beyond the scope of the personal use, exemptions in the law. So if you're giving it away but not selling it, I think you would still need a license from the Cannabis Control Commission.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on the amendment? Microphone number 2.
Robert Easton, 85 Revolutionary Road, member of the Planning Board and speaking for the Planning Board.
Mr. Easton.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. On behalf of the Planning Board, we would be in support of affirmative action on the amendment as presented by Mr. Banfield.
Thank you very much. And by the way, I think these microphones actually come out of their stands so that if it's not at the right height for you, I think you can fix that. Microphone number 1.
Gwendolyn Humphreys, 400 Hayward Mill Road.
Yes, ma'am.
This amendment says that we won't sell it here, but that someone else can sell it somewhere else. I disagree with the whole article, but if we're going to do this, we shouldn't be hypocrites about it.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Microphone number 2.
Christian Kruger, 85 Alcott Road.
Mr. Kruger.
About the gifts question, does that mean that gifts for amounts that would be a personal use would be permitted? So like if you wanted to have a nice little shoe store that happened to have marijuana cookies that you could come in and like have one, that would be allowed, but retail wouldn't?
Madam Moderator, I believe we are now getting into the realm of the enforcement of marijuana use policies as opposed to the regulation of retail establishments. And that is a question I frankly don't know the exact answer to, but that would be more in the criminal code at that point and what is allowed to be done. Again, the Cannabis Control Commission is keeping a very tight leash on these establishments. So I would presume that a retailer that, it's a buy a shoe and get marijuana free would not be allowed.
Okay. All right. Now, so there's a lot of angels on the head of the pin right now. So let's see. Any more important questions or comments on the amendment? Microphone number 5.
Marjorie Daggett, 80 Deaconess Road.
Yes, ma'am.
If I understand what this amendment, to me, it sounds as if you are saying marijuana has a lot of problems and we're concerned about the children, but we'll allow people to manufacture the product. It seems to me that it's very similar to saying, and thinking about and remembering all the work that has been done in the schools about the uses of tobacco and then sanctioning the making of cigarettes. If I understand that, if this amendment, that seems to be the position that is being forwarded, and I object to it. I will vote against this.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 3.
Peter Lee, 140 Walden Street.
Mr. Lee.
I'm a little skeptical about the amendment, but I hear the arguments. I'm very interested in the town's position. That is, we had several experts and town officials in the beginning. Do they view this amendment as an improvement or undermining the policy issues that they addressed?
Mr. Considine, who would like to take that for the Board of Health? Yes. The question is, could we have the opinion of the Board of Health on the amendment? Does this help, harm, or make no difference in terms of the goals of Article 30? While you're figuring that out, let me ask microphone number 5.
Hi, Dawn McCullough, 178 Virginia Road.
Yes.
I am a member of the Youth Advisory Board, although speaking on my own behalf.
Yes, can you get closer to the microphone?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Member of the Youth Advisory Board, but speaking on my own personal behalf. I am not in support of this amendment. I think that it goes against the values of our town and what people in this town come here for, which is open space. What I keep hearing about these establishments that people are wanting to allow, that they would be, my impression is large indoor spaces which would mean that our fields are going to be taken over by large warehouses. And I think that seems against the values of this town and the things that people move to this town for. I also think it's opening up the door, it's getting our kids one step closer and normalizing the adolescents' perception, again, of marijuana, that it must be safe if we're going to cultivate it and do things around that in our town. And normative perceptions around marijuana are one of the largest indicators for adolescent use of marijuana, so I think that we should vote against this amendment.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Constein.
Yes, thank you, Madam Moderator. We initially considered this and decided not to act on it. We felt that we were opposed to marijuana in all its forms in Concord, at this retail, or recreational marijuana, and we decided not to take a position on this. We didn't feel it was the board's prerogative to pick winners or losers in the marijuana business.
Thank you very much. One more. Microphone number 4.
R. Avakian, 501 Powder Mill Road. It's in
Mr.
reference
Avakian.
to the previous question. If this amendment passes and the other establishments would not be opted out, the town's, correct me if I'm wrong, the town would still have control over where those establishments are sited due to ordinary zoning laws and so forth. Isn't that correct?
Ms. Rasmussen, Ms. Hughes, anybody want to tell us the answer to that?
Madam Moderator, Elizabeth Hughes, Town Planner. To answer the question, currently if opt-out fails, the Planning Board would either tonight or passes tonight and goes to a ballot and fails. The Planning Board will move forward with community input in developing zoning bylaws to regulate whichever establishment town meeting allows, whether it be growing, distribution, or retail. That process would move forward if zoning regulations are not adopted specifically dealing with marijuana establishments, then they would be treated as any other retail establishment, growing operation, or distribution center, and they would be allowed in those zone districts where they are currently allowed. The Planning Board in their presentation for Article 32 will display maps showing that, but yes, there are currently places where those uses would be allowed in Concord Center, Thoreau Depot, 9 Acre Corner, West Concord Village, some of the industrial zoning districts, so there are places where it would be permitted.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're getting close to an hour on Article 30 now. Yes. Okay.
Can
yes.
I just add
Microphone
one
number 2.
other clarification?
Dr. Green.
Dr. Green, 341 Madison Drive. In regards to why the Board of Health opted to choose such broad language, we asked ourselves, how do we explain to our children that we don't want them using marijuana, but it's okay for the town of Concord to have testing facilities and other growing facilities so that kids in other towns can use it? So we asked ourselves, how do we explain that to our children? And we found that we couldn't. That's why the language was written broadly.
Thank you very much. Now, if there's something that really hasn't been said or asked yet on the amendment, we could hear some, okay, Mr. Kruger. Microphone number 2.
I apologize so deeply. Christian Kruger, 85 Alcott Road. I feel like about perception. The nuance of explaining why we would allow medical facilities and not allow for retail seems pretty clear to me. I mean, we have isopropyl alcohol for all sorts of, medical needs, but we don't encourage children to drink it because it would be bad for them. People are capable of finding nuance in these things. It's not just a matter of if we allow some scientific, medically strong uses, we're allowing all use and all abuse. We're not endorsing abuse here. we're endorsing the actual reasonable use for industrial and other needs. So I don't see how it would actually be harmful. Thank you.
Thank you. One more burning comment.
Yes.
Microphone number 3.
Gail Heyer, 54 Nancy Road.
Ms. Heyer.
Thank you. So this is new. So, and I believe this is true, I heard this at the presentation in January, if Article 30, which I support without the amendment, I'm against this amendment, if Article 30 fails to pass tonight, we can keep trying. We can try again in town meeting in the fall, try again next April. So I think we should go for the whole thing and just support Article 30 as written.
Thank you very much. Sounds like you're against the amendment. Okay.
That's right.
I see nobody else who wants to speak to the amendment. I think we're ready for a vote on the amendment. Excellent. Okay. So the amendment is on the screen. Mr. Banfield's amendment is to limit the prohibition to retailers only. And you see the language there. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your ballots. Thank you very much. All those opposed? The amendment fails by well more than a majority. Okay, we'll now return to the main motion under Article 30. Microphone number 1.
George Patrick Corrett, 148 Peter Spring Road.
Mr. Corrett.
The thing that I don't quite get about this is why we're approaching marijuana not like we're approaching tobacco. We didn't go and ban tobacco. We didn't go and say, kids, this is the horriblest thing ever. No, we were reasonable to them. And I believe it's one of the few drugs we've ever had success. So if we continue this prohibitionist point of view, I only see failure because that's what we've seen time and time again. If we just go through with this, just like we've done everything else, why would we not see the same results? Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 2.
Louisa Poster, 139 Jenny Dugan Road.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm a public health consultant with a CCHS graduate and current student. I recently did the substance use assessment for Concord and Carlisle along with the Board of Health and Concord Carlisle Youth Services. I also have personal experience in my extended family with marijuana misuse. Many people who voted for recreational marijuana in Massachusetts did not realize it would automatically opt us into having a dispensary in our town. Allowing retail recreational marijuana sales at Concord is a bad idea. Nothing is stopping use within the law here. Concord does not need whatever taxes that may be gained from allowing the sale of marijuana. In any case, it is not certain that the tax dollars will end up in Concord. Not only could a recreational marijuana store in town deter families from locating here, but taxes from the sale of recreational marijuana may not outweigh the town's needs for additional drug education, law enforcement, and emergency medical resources. Some argue that if alcohol can be sold in Concord, then marijuana should also be allowed. But medical marijuana is allowed in Concord, and alcohol is not being positioned and sold as medicinal. A small point traffic in Concord could increase from drug tourism. But most importantly, I'd like to talk about our youth. If Concord high schoolers use a substance, they most often use alcohol and marijuana. The perceived danger of marijuana is dropping significantly. Much of the marijuana being sold in recreational stores is genetically engineered. It's not the natural marijuana that we used to have. Some oils are 85% THC. And packaged in like creme brulee or strawberry. Who were those marketed to? Our kids. Commercialized recreational marijuana is not about selling naturally occurring plants that lots of people used years ago.
Thank you. You're just about out of time.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 3.
Thank you. Gail Heyer, 54 Nancy Road.
Ms. Heyer.
So, in convincing the citizens of Concord to vote for legalization, the marijuana lobby passed a powerful law that allows marijuana sellers in every town, as the earlier speaker just said. So ballot question 4 made it hard to opt out. It's intentionally difficult. So I commend the Board of Health for studying this important issue and bringing it to us and starting the process of opting out. I just wanted to share one thing that Dr. Green said at the presentation in January that she didn't mention in her brief talk earlier. Some marijuana products are designed to appeal to children. You can buy sour gummy candies laced with marijuana. Sorry, I'm getting emotional because my son loves Sour Patch. And he's in elementary school. So edibles like this cause a delayed reaction and effects may not be felt for up to 4 hours. Whatever your views are on marijuana use by mature adults, please protect our children and vote yes for Article 30.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 4.
Thank you. Kathy Cucolo, 243 Katarina Heights.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to thank the Department of Health and all of the people who've put so much effort into the research and presentation of Article 30. I personally find that this whole discussion very reminiscent of Prohibition. I don't understand why we're not a dry town, because alcohol has been proven to be far more destructive than anything else we've talked about this evening. People die and wreck lives in alcohol abuse. I've never seen us propose that we become a dry town to save our youth, to save ourselves. So I find this a bit regressive, and I am opposed to Article 30.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 5.
Brad Dye, 1019 Main Street.
Mr. Dye.
Madam Moderator, I hope that Article 30 is defeated. I sat patiently for nearly 12 minutes while the petitioner and co-petitioners developed several arguments as to why marijuana should not be legal, and listened intently because I wanted to be persuaded. I have an open mind about this issue. I waited and waited and waited, and not once did I hear one single argument for why a retail establishment should not be located in Concord. This is a relitigation of a public policy question which was asked and answered by the voters in the last election cycle. Those arguments did not prevail, and the wisdom of the voters was to go in a different direction and try something other than prohibition. The one thing that marijuana prohibition proved from a public safety perspective is that it did not work. And for me, the argument that legalized marijuana tends to cause additional driving issues is all the argument you need to keep retail closer to home, Madam Moderator, because citizens of Concord are going to use this whether the Board of Health wants them to or not, whether it's good for them or not, they're going to. And I don't want them driving all over creation to try to find their products. I would rather that the market provide solutions for all people. Additionally, I believe that there is a lot of fear in the room about what our town is going to turn into if we do this. Not every town of 17,000 or fewer people is going to have a pot shop. West Concord isn't going to turn into Venice Beach. This is not a realistic fear.
Sir, you're just about out of time there. In fact, you are out of time.
Thank you. I hope that the article does not prevail.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 6.
Sue Felshen, 19 Sunnyside Lane.
Ms. Felshen.
We've heard a great deal tonight about claims that marijuana is as bad for developing children and for people in general as alcohol is. If we want to ban the sale of marijuana in the town of Concord, we should put our money where our mouth is and also ban the sale of alcohol. Therefore, I would like to move to add the addition of a ban of the sale of alcohol to this article. Listen to yourselves. I would like to, but I will not. It would fail, it would waste our time, and it's probably out of scope. But think about how miserable you felt at the thought of banning alcohol in this town and how you thought it was an unreasonable idea, and then please vote no on this article.
Thank you very much. That would have been out of scope, Ms. Felshen. Microphone number 2.
Hi, thank you very much. Eden Evans from 684 Sudbury Road.
Ms. Evans.
Thank you. So marijuana drug driving is common. Most people don't perceive themselves to be too impaired to drive after marijuana use, particularly after edibles with their delayed effect. Colorado has had increased marijuana drug driving arrests since the recreational markets opened by twofold. And marijuana intoxication doubles the rate of motor vehicle accidents and triples the rate of fatalities. And this is worse when combined with even moderate doses of alcohol. So an alcohol level of 0.05 plus some marijuana gives you a higher crash rate than either alone. And so for that reason, the Colorado Attorney General's office contacted our group at MGH to help them devise a portable detection method for marijuana impairment, because they're not able to get convictions for drug driving, even in the severe cases of vehicular homicide. I'd like to just make 2 points about legal tobacco and how we've succeeded so well with legal tobacco. There's still 430,000 deaths per year in the United States, tobacco-related illnesses. So it's a legal drug that causes major death, major mortality issues. And many people have said they think that legal regulated marijuana would be safer, but there's just data that just came out that in 2015, Colorado recalled 300,000 edibles that contained banned pesticides. So the regulation is just really not worked out yet, even in Colorado and Washington, and certainly not in Massachusetts. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we're at just under an hour and 10 minutes on Article 30 now. And I'm guessing that there's not a person in the hall who hasn't made up their minds how they're going to vote. And I would ask you to consider that as you stand at the microphone. Microphone number 5.
Ralph Reichley, 259 Independence Road. I'd like to call the question.
Madam Moderator.
This is a non-debatable motion, requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor of calling the previous question? Thank you very much. All those opposed? The motion carries. We will now proceed to vote on Article 30. This is the original proposed bylaw amendment as printed in the warrant, and both of the amendments did fail. So we're where we are in the warrant. All those in favor of Article 30? Thank you. All those opposed? The motion carries by more than a majority. And I do so declare. We'll now move on to Article 31.
Madam Moderator, I'm Carl Packard, 86 Butternut Circle, Chair of the Finance Committee and speaking for the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Packard.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I'm here to move that the town meeting take affirmative action on Article 31 as printed in the warrant. The Finance Committee sponsors this article to accept Mass General Law, Chapter 64N, Section 3, and adopt a 3% local excise tax on retail marijuana products. There are several taxes that can apply to retail sales of marijuana or cannabis. There's the regular state sales tax of 6.25%. There's the state marijuana excise tax of 10.75%, which comes up to 17%. And then there's the local excise tax, which is what we're discussing here, which is 3% if the tax is accepted. So the total tax would be 20%. As has been pointed out before, these taxes do not apply to the sale of medical marijuana or to wholesale agricultural production. The state revenue, according to an analysis by the Massachusetts Department of Revenue published in the Boston Globe in December of 2017, projects that in fiscal year 19, taxes on recreational marijuana sales could net the state between $44 million and $82 million. There are other higher estimates from the Globe and from New Frontier Data, an industry consultant. We also have some actual historic data from medical marijuana sales in Massachusetts. Per the Executive Office of Health and Human Services, in 2016, Massachusetts medical dispensaries sold a volume of the product, including concentrates and edibles, with an estimated value of $52 million. So what is the use of the state sales tax? What is the use of the state sales tax? Well, it goes to the state's general fund and may be used similar to other sales tax revenue. The state marijuana sale excise tax, the 10.75%, goes to the Marijuana Regulation Fund, first to be used for operation of the Cannabis Control Commission, and then also, secondly, to address public and behavioral health issues as well as certain local needs. The local revenue, there are two sources. There's the host community agreement, which may impose an impact fee of up to 3% of gross sales for a limited number of years to offset the costs related to the establishment of the business. And then there's the local excise tax, which is what we're discussing here, which is collected by the state with other sales tax and distributed to the municipality quarterly. This tax would be administered similarly to the local meals tax. So what are the uses of the local revenue? It will be a general fund receipt with no requirement at this time to segregate it in any way. It may be used for any lawful purpose, including support of the general fund budget, or to offset impacts of recreational marijuana use on town services, including public safety, public health, and other similar needs. So the big question is, what is the estimate of local tax collection? And I'm not going to portray a picture of, big piles of gold or anything like that. As a matter of fact, without historic data, there's really no way of calculating a sound estimate of sales or taxes in the individual locality. We know somewhat what the state overall revenue would be, but there are local unknowns, including the number of towns allowing sales, competing vendors in neighboring towns, and the accessibility of locations in Concord versus the accessibility in other towns. In other words, location, location, location. We've reviewed the experience of municipalities in other states, including the city of Durango, Colorado, which has a population similar to Concord and levies a 3% local tax. Durango has collected $643,000 in calendar year 16 on $21.4 million in sales at an average of $2.14 million per establishment. So Durango has 10 establishments. They also have a rodeo, too. And then in calendar year 17, they collected $716,000 on $23.9 million in sales at an average of $2.39 million per establishment. So based on the projected sales in Massachusetts, assuming 150 towns with retail marijuana sales, a rough conjecture would indicate a potential of around $75,000 in local taxes in the first full year. So to sum up, with the outcome of Article 30, passage of Article 31 is still relevant because the outcome of the ballot question that would follow on Article 30, which we just passed, is still pending. In addition, the outcome of the vote on the moratorium, which will be following this presentation, is also still pending. So if retail establishments are allowed, we would want to have a tax in place. So also that the tax vote must take place 30 days prior to the quarter in which taxes would be collected.
Mr. Packard, you're just about done.
Summary. To sum up, sources of revenue outside of the property tax levy are an important part of Concord's budget, equaling almost 15% of our funding. These sources include state aid and available fund balances, as well as local receipts such as the motor vehicle excise tax and other local taxes, of which this marijuana excise tax would be one. If you have ever tried to meet a budget, you know that when it comes down to it, every bit counts. For our town budgets, it often comes down to sums of less than $100,000 that are utilized to close the budget. The local excise tax on cannabis will not be insignificant in balancing our budgets. So the Finance Committee recommends affirmative action on Article 31 as printed in the warrant.
Thank you very much. Could we have a second on the motion under Article 31? Thank you very much. Ms. Hotchkiss, do you wish to address the meeting? Both the Select Board and, as you heard, the Finance Committee recommend affirmative action on Article 31.
Jane Hotchkiss, 1479 Main Street, member of the Concord Select Board and speaking for the Select Board. Thank you, Madam Moderator. In Article 31, the Finance Committee attaches a sales tax of 3% to any form of retail sale of marijuana in Concord, as we've just heard. The Select Board was unanimous in its support for this article, regardless of the will of town meeting is just exercised tonight, or if it's revisited in the future as to retail cultivation, distribution, and sales of marijuana in Concord. We believe it's in Concord's best fiscal interest that the town has reserved the right to assess a local tax on retail sales of marijuana products. While town meeting has just voted to opt out of retail sales for now, we do not know whether this will be successful at the ballot, and whether or not it is, having this taxing authority embedded into our fiscal planning allows any future decisions to have a financial benefit to Concord. The Select Board unanimously supports affirmative action on this article. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The floor is open for questions and comments. I don't see anyone. I think we might be ready for a vote on this. And we have been sitting for a long time. So how about we all stand up and have this as a standing vote. All those in favor of Article 31, please hold your ballots up. Thank you very much. All those opposed? The motion carries almost unanimously, and I do so declare. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to the last of the marijuana trilogy. We'll hear from Mr. Easton. Can I have a second on the motion which is on the screen? I see that I have one. Thank you.
Robert Easton, 85 Revolutionary Road, member of the Planning Board, here speaking on behalf of the Planning Board.
Mr. Easton.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Article 32 is to determine whether the town will vote to amend the zoning bylaw section 4.83, the marijuana establishment temporary moratorium, to delete the date July 31, 2018, and insert in its place the date December 31, 2018, effectively to extend the moratorium that was put in place at last year's town meeting. As other speakers have mentioned, we still need to act on this given the ballot question is still open after the passage of Article 30 this evening. Just from a timeline standpoint, in 2016, there was the Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act passed by the state. 2017, we passed our temporary moratorium, and the moratorium was to allow the town time to study and consider the regulation of marijuana retail, product manufacture, and growing operations, henceforth marijuana establishments, as we've discussed extensively this evening. For reference, I think there was a question earlier as to where marijuana establishments, and in this case, registered medical marijuana dispensaries are allowed by special permit. The map in front of you shows where these marijuana dispensaries are allowed in town. Why does the moratorium need to be extended? Amendments to the Act, the Marijuana Cannabis Act, extended to March 15th. I believe the Cannabis Control Commission has submitted their rules and regulations. I believe they're out. And the Planning Board believes the town should not decide how to regulate marijuana establishments until the rules and regulations, we've had a chance to absorb those and act on those. Now that they're out. Why extend the moratorium until only December 31? The Attorney General has denied moratorium bylaws in other communities with a date beyond December 31, 2018. Therefore, the Planning Board is recommending the current moratorium be extended until December 31, 2018, so it's accepted by the Attorney General and not leaving the town unprotected. Why is the adoption of Article 32 critical? 2 reasons. The current moratorium ends July 31, 2018, and now that the opt-out Article 30 has passed, it's still subject to a subsequent ballot vote. What if Article 32 does not pass? If Article 32 does not pass, then there are 2 scenarios: do nothing further or adopt zoning bylaw by July 31, 2018. Under scenario 1, do nothing further. If the current temporary moratorium expires with no zoning regulations, marijuana establishments would be considered like any other retail business, product manufacturer, and industrial growing operation. For reference again, retail establishments would be allowed in the areas blue, noted on the map in front of you. Marijuana product manufacturers is considered a light manufacturing and manufacturing use. They're here again allowed in the areas shown in the map in blue. And growing operations also are considered light manufacturing and manufacturing use, again, allowed in the areas shown in blue. I believe this was a question asked earlier this evening. So, in order to look at what would happen in order to adapt zoning bylaws by September 31, 2018, which again is the current moratorium, the community would have a community discussion. The Planning Board would undertake community discussions on how and where to regulate marijuana establishments, develop a zoning bylaw language, call a special town meeting, hold special town meeting public hearings, hold special town meetings, and pass the bylaw language. I think that's all awful lot to do between now and July 31, 2018. It's very challenging. It's not a possible time frame to achieve. What will happen next if Article 32 is passed? The Planning Board will undertake a community-wide planning process to discuss the potential impacts, locations, and operations of marijuana establishments, consider the Control Commission's regulations, draft new zoning bylaw, hold a special town meeting to adopt the bylaw before December 31, 2018, and hold a subsequent ballot questions. Therefore, the Planning Board supports affirmative action on Article 32.
Thank you very much, Mr. Easton. Mr. Considine, are you planning to address this article? You look different, Mr. Considine.
Hi, Jill Block, 311 Garfield Road, speaking on behalf of the Board of Health.
Ms. Block.
The Board of Health voted unanimously to recommend affirmative action on Article 32. Although we just passed Article 30, it must also be passed by the second vote to become effective. So in the interim or in the event that the bylaw change does not pass at election, an extension of the existing zoning moratorium until December is needed to prevent marijuana establishments from being licensed in the short term. The zoning moratorium will allow the town time to conduct a public planning process to decide where marijuana establishments should be located in the event that they are permitted in the future.
Thank you very much. Ms. Hotchkiss?
Jane Hotchkiss, 1479 Main Street, member of the Concord Select Board, and speaking for the Select Board. Ms. Hotchkiss. Thank you. Back again. And perhaps with the most important of all the points in this request for time. That's what we really need here, time. Article 32, which as you now know, would extend our current moratorium on retail sales and cultivation and distribution from July to the end of December. Because town meeting has voted the first step in opting out and has decided to take a pass at retail for now, this moratorium extension is critical because we simply don't know yet what will come from the townwide ballot. This period of uncertainty puts us in a permitting gray zone, and a moratorium allows the town time to catch up. And at this point, I suspect we all have a sense of how complicated this new retail space would be and how difficult it will be to achieve regulation by December 31st, never mind July. The Select Board unanimously believes affirmative action on Article 32 is in Concord's best interest.
Thank you very much. The floor is now open for questions and comments. Microphone number 5.
Brad Dye, 1019 Main Street.
Yes, sir.
Madam Moderator, I hope that Article 32 is defeated. I view it as redundant and also bad public policy. The appropriate authorities have now had a year to plan. They have draft regulations available to them. We have considered what our zoning would be, and if these sorts of establishments were to locate in town, where they might go. I feel that the town has given itself adequate leave to plan as necessary. And I don't see another 6 months really adding any new benefit. I don't believe that there would be new information that would come to light. The real benefit to a moratorium is that it is a town's way of signaling, to the extent that the law allows, that it does not want these sorts of establishments in town. Well, our actions on Article 30 and 31 have just sent that signal loud and clear, as well as last year's effort at the moratorium. So it becomes redundant to send that signal to prospective retailers that maybe Concord wouldn't be the most welcoming place to them. We now have restrictive zoning. We have a town meeting that has said loud and clear, we don't want you here. And we have prospectively promulgated a tax. Nobody's going to want to come here. So I view this as redundant, and also, additionally, I view it as bad public policy to continue to extend a moratorium when the town had adequate time over the last year and during the ballot question before it to think about these questions. Thank you. I hope that Article 32 is defeated.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 1.
David O'Brien, 67 MacArthur Road.
Mr. O'Brien.
Madam Moderator, through you, when do we envision this town ballot taking place? And if it fails, what period of time do town leaders, planning board, I guess, most of all, but what length of time would be a comfortable period of time to come up with a process to implement the new cannabis law?
Who would like to answer that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Mr. Easton?
I didn't hear the question. I'm
You
sorry.
didn't catch the question. The question was when is, Mr. Johnson, you're going to answer the question. Come on down.
So I just wanted to answer by saying that we, on the planning board, would not intend to wait until hearing the results of the election to begin deliberating upon new zoning bylaws. You know, we don't know when, if ever, these establishments will be allowed in town. They might be next year, you know, so we really need to develop these bylaws. The reason that we did not develop them over the past year is that the Cannabis Control Commission only published their rules and regulations last month. So we didn't have anything to base a bylaw on until last month. So now we can finally get going, but we obviously could not bring, after the warrant closed in January, any new legislation for you guys to approve this year. We do expect to have a special town meeting at the end of this year, though, before the moratorium expires, in order to be able to put the right bylaws in place.
Thank you very much. Is there any sense from the select board or the town clerk on this election has not been called yet, right? Okay, so we don't have a date for it. Did you have a follow-up question, sir, at microphone number 1?
Just for planning purposes, I mean, everybody's going to leave here tonight thinking there's an election. Do we have a ballpark of a quarter of the year that it might happen, or?
I'm sorry, say it again?
When it may occur, when the ballot may occur this year, like within months, within 6 months, any kind of a ballpark?
Select board, do you have a plan with respect to when you're going to, or have you not deliberated on that? The town manager will address the question.
Madam Moderator, it was suggested at the hearing that the board consider scheduling this election in conjunction with a state election, either the state primary in September or the general election in November. And the board is going to give that some thought after town meeting concludes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 5.
Marjorie Daggett, 80 Deaconess Road.
Ms. Daggett.
It may be a small matter, but through you, Madam Moderator, I would like to ask Mr. Easton or Mr. Johnson about the map that lists the blue, which is where the marijuana establishments can be. Is that correct? And the blue includes Emerson Hospital and Newbury Court. And I live in Newbury Court, and I can't imagine that we should be included in the map for a marijuana establishment when we don't even allow cigarette smoking on the property.
Ms. Hughes, are you going to address that? Would you like the map to go back up? No, okay.
Madam Moderator, Elizabeth Hughes, Town Planner. The maps that were depicted in the Planning Board's presentation show the areas where retail, distribution, and growing operations would be allowed if no zoning bylaws are adopted specifically addressing those uses.
Oh, thank you.
So they would be treated like any other retail business, any other light manufacturing for distribution and growing.
Thank you very much.
Microphone number 3.
Ruth Lauer, 100 Keynes Road.
Ms. Lauer.
Thank you. I'm asking a question of clarification on the presentation. I retained that we're going to have a special town meeting whether this article prevails or fails. Is that correct?
Special town meeting for Ms. Hughes will explain.
Thank you.
Madam Moderator, should this article fail, the current moratorium will expire July 31st of this year. So we would have to go through the public process of drafting zoning bylaws and holding public hearings and having a special town meeting and having those zoning bylaws passed before July 31st. So yes, a special town meeting would have to be held. If the moratorium does pass under this article, the moratorium is extended to December 31st. The planning board would have to go through the same public process of drafting zoning, holding public hearings, and having a special town meeting before December 31st.
Okay.
Whether it passes or fails, there will be a special town meeting. It's whether the community and the board does it by July 31st or by December 31st.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 3.
Sorry, Garrett Whitney, 296 Heathwood Road. But if Article 30 passes, is that still true?
Madam Moderator, so Article 30 has passed. It's whether
You know what I mean. I mean in the
it's whether it's
follow-up.
accepted, whether it passes at a ballot vote.
Correct.
If it passes at a ballot vote, it will, if the select board determines that it's going to either call a special town ballot or whether they will go on the state ballot. September would be too late for the planning board to start a public process on drafting zoning bylaws. So it's my understanding the select board will be discussing, whether to call a special ballot, town ballot tonight. So if it is September, the planning board will still need to start now the public process for drafting zoning bylaws.
Right, but that's not my question. My question is about the special town meeting for the end of the year. We would not need that if the ban went into effect, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing no one else at a microphone, I think we are ready for a vote on Article 32. Now, this is a zoning bylaw, this moratorium, so it does require a 2/3 vote. All those in favor of Article 32, the extension of the temporary moratorium, thank you very much. All those opposed, the motion carries by well more than 2/3, and I do so declare. Having addressed Article 33 on the consent calendar, we will now proceed to Article 34. This is a zoning bylaw amendment on the height of accessory buildings. We'll hear from Mr. Say, and can we have a second on the motion? Thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm Alan Say, 131 Elizabeth Ave, and I'm a member of the Planning Board and speaking on behalf of the Planning Board.
Mr. Say.
So I'm here so that the town takes affirmative action on Article 34 as printed on the warrant. So what will the article amend in the bylaw? It's the limit of accessory structures in the residential zoning districts by adding the following language. In Residence AA, Residence A, Residence C, Residence B districts, any accessory structure located within the required minimum side or rear yard shall be limited in height to not to more than 24 feet to the peak of the pitched roof or 18 feet to the highest point of the exterior in the case of a flat roof. So why is this? Why the planning board is proposing this bylaw amendment? Because currently the zoning bylaw allows accessory structures that are located behind the most rear portion of the principal structure to be located as close as 5 feet to the side and rear property line. So on the plan you see an example of accessory structures very close to the abutting neighbors. So why is the planning board proposing this bylaw amendment? Currently, property owners are allowed to build accessory structures that are at least 35 feet in height. For example, barns, garages with full-story second habitable spaces and pitched roof that are as close as 5 feet from the property line. So why is the planning board proposing this bylaw amendment? The structures can overshadow adjacent properties and may become a source of conflict between adjacent property owners. So here are examples of accessory structures that are fairly large and as large as the principal structures, basically, principal houses. So the abutters do not have any say in the location of these accessory structures. Here in yellow you see the abutters and how these accessory structures are so close to the abutters, basically, that can be up to 35 feet in height currently. So what if I want a taller accessory structure? The 35-foot height limit would still be allowed for accessory structures that are not in the required rear or side yard. If a property owner wishes to have a taller accessory structure located within the required rear or side yard, can seek a special permit waiver from the Zoning Board of Appeals. What is required for a special permit waiver? The Zoning Board of Appeals must find a literal application of the applicable height requirement would be unreasonable because there are no reasonable alternatives available, and the desired relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the neighborhood, without derogating from the intent of the purpose of the zoning bylaw. What is required for a special permit waiver? As part of a special permit process, abutters within 300 feet of the property are notified of the ZBA public hearing, basically. And can I still have habitable space in the second floor of the accessory structures? Yes, but a limit of 24 feet of a pitch roof and 18 feet for a flat roof would still be allowed for an accessory structure with a first floor and a partial habitable second floor. So I hope you vote favorably for this article.
Thank you very much. The Select Board recommends affirmative action on Article 34, and we'll open the floor to questions and comments. We need a 2/3 vote on this article, and I see no questions or comments. It looks like we're ready for a vote. All those in favor of Article 34? Thank you. All those opposed? The motion carries nearly unanimously. That's more than 2/3, and I do so declare. We'll now proceed to Article 35, and this is another zoning bylaw amendment on combined business and residence. We'll hear from Mr. Kleiman. Again, a 2/3 vote, and do we have a second on the motion? I see that we do. Thank you.
Gary Kleiman, 57 Central Street, member of the Planning Board, speaking on behalf of the Planning Board.
Mr. Kleiman.
Thank you. I'm moving that we take affirmative action on Article 35 as printed in the warrant. If you go, thank you, slide number 2. What will this article do? It'll allow the Zoning Board of Appeals to reduce the required amount of open space for the combined business residence use, provided that the project is in harmony with the intent of the bylaw and won't be detrimental or injurious to the neighborhood. On the next slide, a little context as to what is the combined business residence use and where is it allowed. As it sounds, the combined business residence use is essentially allowing a dwelling unit to be located on the same lot where commercial uses are allowed. And right now that is allowed, if we move to the next slide, I'll show you where it is allowed in our commercial and business districts. You may be familiar with some of these locations from the prior maps you've seen, 9 Acre Corner, West Concord Business District, and the Damon Mill. Next slide. Obviously downtown, our Concord Center Business District and the Thoreau Depot. Also some limited business districts in that area, as well as Monument Square and the Millbrook Terry. Next slide. This is also an allowed use by special permit in the town's medical professional districts. So Newbury Court and Emerson Hospital, as well as the medical complex across the street. Next slide. So what is the current problem with our bylaw that this amendment is trying to address? There are many existing buildings in our business and commercial districts that occupy most, if not all, of the lot area. Thus, having an open space requirement as well prevents a second-story or third-story residential unit from being developed where we may have a commercial district. The current option right now would be for a commercial property owner with limited area to perhaps seek relief from parking requirements so that they could accommodate the open space. So it's sort of pitting open space against parking. We've heard a lot about the requests for parking in the commercial districts. Next slide. So why is the Planning Board proposing this bylaw amendment? Second floor residential development in our village centers is desirable from a planning perspective, from our long-range planning perspective, from our housing perspectives. In many locations, there are alternative open space opportunities within walking distance near these village centers. Rideout Field, Emerson Field, Monument Square. There are places you can get out and enjoy some outdoor space without necessarily requiring open space on the second floor of our commercial districts. Allowing a waiver in those cases will promote mixed-use development in our denser commercial districts. So for that reason, I urge your affirmative support. Next slide, on Article 35.
Thank you very much. If I did not already mention it, the Select Board recommends affirmative action on Article 35. And once again, we need a 2/3 vote as this is a zoning bylaw. Are there questions or comments from the floor? Seeing none, we are ready for a vote on Article 35. All those in favor? Thank you. All those opposed? That carries by more than 2/3, and I do so declare. Having addressed Article 36 and 37 on the consent calendar, we will now proceed to Article 38. And we'll hear from Mr. Johnson. This is a zoning bylaw amendment to site plan review. The motion is to take affirmative action on the article as printed in the warrant. Do we have a second? I see that we do.
Matt Johnson, 21 Winthrop Street, member of the Planning Board.
Mr. Johnson.
I am supporting Article 38, where what we are intending to do is to add an additional criterion to our site plan review, and that criterion would be to incorporate sustainability principles into the site design. So we're looking for a plan that's responsive to the environment and that actively contributes to the development of a more sustainable community. So why is the planning board proposing this? First of all, the town has made sustainability a priority. They've adopted sustainable municipal practices many years ago. And then last year at town meeting, we passed Article 51, which commits the town to dramatic reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. So sustainability, needs to be an important part of our design process as well within the town. And so adding sustainability criteria to site plan reviews, which is really our device for managing how design happens in the town, is critical to that process. So next slide, please. So right now, our site plan review process assesses a lot of different factors. So things like drainage, sight and sound boundaries, convenience and safety of movement, and so on. So you can see we look at parking, refuse disposal, and so like now we have the Deschata Country Club in front of us, and they're redeveloping their property. Cafe Nero in Concord Center is proposing a new retail business. So we go through these site plan reviews as a matter of course. But today, if we bring up a sustainability issue, and if we go to the next slide, things like, hey, have you in a residential property made provisions for solar or for electric car charging within a garage unit? Or have you built to LED building code standards? These are not criteria that our current applications for site plan review even reference. And in fact, while we ask these questions, developers really haven't been prepped and often haven't really considered this as an important factor in their designs. So this is the time, of course, at the beginning when it's up to 10 times cheaper to deliver these kinds of benefits. So what we'd like to do is to get this at the outset, make these part of our standard review process. Next. So what we'd like to do is to have your support in this, and now we will make it something that we will put into our standard practices.
Thank you very much. We'll hear from Ms. Kaufman or the Select Board.
Good evening. I'm Alice Kaufman, 1615 Lowell Road, member of the Select Board and speaking for the board.
Ms. Kaufman.
Madam Moderator. The Select Board unanimously voted affirmative action on Article 38. This article is the next logical step in carrying out the voters' wishes to move Concord on a more sustainable path for the future. The zoning bylaw amendment would codify sustainability as part of the decision-making framework when the town undertakes site plan review, as you just heard. And it also parallels the current approach being used to develop the comprehensive long-range plan, in which all departments incorporate sustainability and resiliency into their decisions. 3 times before, one being last night, this legislative body voted to support sustainability, resiliency principles and actions. And this is one more step that moves us in that direction. As communities across the Commonwealth and the world grapple with the potential impacts from a changing climate system, Concord will be in a position to build a more resilient and sustainable community with these combined efforts. The Select Board urges affirmative action on this article.
Thank you very much. The floor is open for question and comment. This is a 2/3 vote. Here comes a question or a comment. Microphone number 5.
Dean Banfield, 73 Walden Terrace, member of the Finance Committee, but speaking for myself.
Mr. Banfield.
The new clause H, which incorporates sustainability principles as part of site plan review, it has a very broad sense of, you know, we're trying to do the right thing, and you listed a number of really excellent ideas about how an applicant could present you with some sustainable features. Is there going to be some sort of regulatory framework written around this? This is a very generalized principle, so that an applicant can have a sense of, I've done enough. I've added enough sustainable features that I'm acceptable. How are they to know where the, you know, how hard you're going to push them? I guess that's my question.
Thank you. Ms. Rasmussen?
Marcia Rasmussen, Director of Planning and Land Management. We have thought about this, and we have reached out to our new Sustainability Director to help us draft examples and a framework, as well as help with the criteria as this whole area of expertise evolves. So that's the intention.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 5.
Yes, Sheldon Hines, 74 The Valley Road.
Yes, sir.
I have a follow-up to the previous question. There doesn't seem to be a definition of sustainability in the language that I read. In my experience in reading, there are sometimes conflicting things that can be done for sustainability. If you choose metal over wood, wood over metal, there could be arguments as to which is more sustainable. Metal lasts longer, wood has to come from trees which are cut down. I think we need more than examples. I think we need a definition of sustainability. And if the LEEDS criteria are good ones to use, are they sufficient? I think that I agree that this is extremely vague, and I don't know how examples alone will help developers who are right now trying to plan for this, and they might argue that your examples are non-regulatory. How would you address this? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll hear from Ms. Rasmussen.
You're right that sustainability hasn't been well defined. It is not defined in this example. The board weighs each developer's proposal on the merits of the proposal, and because of the diversity of projects that get reviewed by the board, they didn't want to limit particular elements, so it will be up to each developer to present what are the benefits, and it will be the board's opportunity to review that. We do have the ability to hire outside consultants to review that if it's too technical, but right now it is not defined.
Yes, Mr. Johnson would like to add something.
This issue also came up at the hearing, and I just wanted to mention what I said at that time, which is that if you look through our zoning bylaw, you will find that all of the criteria are very broadly written, and that, you know, that's on purpose so that we don't have to come back to you every year and rewrite the bylaw as everything changes. So we do, with our rules and regulations and with our application process, we have those details, and certainly the developers work with town staff as they bring their proposals forward. So as a matter of practice, you know, while our bylaw does have lofty language in places, this is a implementable feature.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 1.
Madam Moderator, Wally Johnston, 1479 Main Street.
Mr. Johnston.
Member of the school committee, the Concord School Committee and the Regional School Committee, but speaking for myself. In light of the passage of Article 23, I would propose an amendment to this, that in the 2 places that the phrase incorporation of sustainability principles, which would be the first paragraph H and paragraph H on page 97, we would add in between the words sustainability and principles and resiliency.
Are you proposing an amendment, Mr. Johnston?
Yes.
Well, you'll have to approach the table to work your amendment out so that we can put it on the screen. Well, that's an interesting question. Town Council? I'll rule the proposed amendment to be within the scope of the article. Mr. Johnston, while we're waiting for that to happen, is there anything further you'd like to say in support of your amendment? Microphone 5.
Pardon me?
Microphone 5, there you are. They need to know which one to turn on.
I understand. Simply that the body voted 2 nights ago to pass Article 23, which is directly related in ways to sustainability and resiliency, and if we are in keeping with comments that were made during discussions about that, both by, well, primarily I think from the Select Board, about the things we are doing to incorporate resiliency into our processes, it would seem to me this article should include that word.
Thank you. While we're waiting for this amendment to it's about to go up. Okay. Are there any questions or comments on the proposed amendment from the floor? We're now going to turn our discussion to the amendment, and we will vote on that before returning to the main motion. Yeah, the Planning Board has a position on the proposed amendment that they would like to share.
So the Planning Board supports the amendment. Actually, one of the examples that I gave on the low impact development and stormwater, residential stormwater bylaw, these are examples of resilience. We already actually had that in the spirit of what we're trying to achieve, but I also appreciate that resilience needs to be separately identified as a goal in addition to sustainability, and so we support that.
Well, I'm feeling like this amendment is clear enough that we can consider this without seeing exactly where it would appear. So we have, if you have your warrant, Article 38, you would see that in item H is what's being added to the site plan review. It says incorporation of sustainability principles into the site design that result in a plan that's responsive to the environment and actively contributes to the development of a more sustainable community. And the amendment proposes that we have that language say incorporation of sustainability principles and climate resiliency goals. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to add and climate resiliency goals. So is everyone feeling comfortable enough that they understand the proposed amendment to vote on it? Raise your ballots if you feel comfortable enough to vote on this. That's great. That's an advisory ballot. Okay. So all those, and this only requires a majority vote, the amendment, even though the article itself requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor of the proposed amendment to add resiliency, climate resiliency goals, thank you very much. All those opposed? Excellent. The amendment passes. Let's return to discussion of the main motion, now amended to add Oh, and resiliency principles. So now let's return to the main motion, which now is incorporating sustainability and resiliency principles into site design. I see Ms. Felshen rushing for a microphone. No, she's changing her mind. Okay. Seeing no one at a microphone, it looks like we are ready for a vote on Article 38. All those in favor of Article 38, thank you. All those opposed, that motion carries by well more than 2/3, and I do so declare. We'll now proceed to Article 39. Mr. Johnson, come on back. You got a similar exercise. This is a very similar article. It is a zoning bylaw amendment that addresses site plans for religious uses, educational uses, and child care facilities. And the motion is to move affirmative action on Article 39 as printed in the warrant. Do I have a second? I see that I do. Mr. Johnson.
Matt Johnson, 21 Winthrop Street. So we actually would like to amend our motion to reflect the wording that was used for Article 38. Article 39 is in fact identical in purpose to Article 38. The difference here is, so you see here, incorporation of sustainability principles and resiliency goals into the site design that result in a plan that's responsive to the environment, actively contributes to the development of a more sustainable community. Go to the next slide. The reason why you're getting this deja vu is because the review of educational and child care and religious uses falls under a different part of our bylaw than other uses. These are, in effect, protected uses. We, as a zoning board, conduct site plan reviews for these uses. We can place conditions upon them, but we can't withhold approval on these kinds of projects. You can't tell someone whether or not they can build their church, you know, not the same way that you could tell someone whether or not they can build their country club. So we have to have a separate set of bylaw pieces here. And so the exact same language, we would insert the exact same list of conditions, is just in a different part of the bylaw. So next slide. So we want, of course, our religious and educational and child care facilities to also have these principles in place. And so we ask for your support. And so not as printed in the warrant, but as it will soon be printed.
All right, and Mr. Johnson, you're going to use the exact same language that was added to the last one.
Insert
so
and resiliency goals.
Well, it's actually and it's just going to be
and resiliency. And resiliency, excuse me.
He's making an amendment. That's right. Okay. So we have Mr. Johnson's motion to amend Article 39 to add the words "and resiliency" before principles in just the same way that we did in Article 38. Do we have a second for the amendment? I see that we do. Does anyone wish to address the amendment? I see that no one does. Once again, could you give me an advisory vote? Do you feel clear enough about this to vote on it without having it on the screen? Excellent. Thank you very much. All those in favor of the amendment? Thank you. All those opposed? The amendment carries by a substantial majority, and we'll now move back to discussion of the main motion, now amended to include sustainability and resiliency principles in the language in the article, in the motion rather. Does anyone wish to address the main motion? Excellent. Looks like we're ready for a vote. This is a 2/3 vote on the bylaw amendment. All those in favor of Article 39? Thank you. All those opposed? The motion carries by 2/3 comfortably, and I do so declare. And we will now proceed to Article 40. Okay, so Article 40, the motion is on the screen, and the motion is to take affirmative action on Article 40 as it's printed in the handout applicable to the article. So there was a handout out there that you should have received. And do I have a second for the motion? I see that I do. Okay, let's go.
Julie Delsproul, 18 Barkus Farm Road. And there are actually two handouts. One includes the motion language along with the close-up of the overlay map, and the other is a map of what the expanded overlay district would look like upon passage of this article.
Thank you, Ms. Delsproul.
So Article 40 expands the wireless overlay map to include additional acres on the Middlesex School campus. Specifically, this amendment expands the overlay district to include all of parcel 1533, which is owned by Middlesex School and is about 300 acres, excluding a 1,000-foot setback along the northwestern border. This is a map of what the expanded overlay district would look like. The gray areas are the parts of town included in the overlay. Article 40 only expands the overlay in the upper left corner on the parallel border. This is a close-up of the parcel. The blue is currently included in the overlay, the yellow is what would be added, and the orange is the buffer to be excluded. It is important for Article 40 to pass so that there are more alternative sites for cell towers at Middlesex that do not violate the town bylaws requiring a 1,000-foot setback from single-family homes and child care centers that are a higher elevation and have limited tree cover. It should be noted that when the overlay was established, the back of the Middlesex property was all wooded. But about 10 years ago, acres of trees were clear-cut for the school's playing fields, so this is now a large, elevated, and open area. Why is this article needed? For about 20 years, Middlesex has been paid by wireless carriers to place the cell tower on the smokestack of their facilities building. When the school decided to repurpose the building into a music and student center, they also decided that the cell tower must be removed from the smokestack. This was not done to enhance the cellular service in town, but because the equipment was too unsightly to be on their new green building. So you can see what it looks like. This is a photo from the Boston Globe on the new building with the equipment still on it. So that the tower can be removed, an application was filed with the town by Industrial Tower and Wireless to construct a 120-foot freestanding tower on the edge of the Middlesex property. As a abutting neighborhood, we are not opposed to wireless facilities or the relocation of this tower. Many of us lived on Barkus Farm when the tower was expanded, and we did not oppose this since the current tower, is more than 1,000 feet away. It was not too tall at 90 feet, and it is camouflaged on an existing building. But this freestanding tower is a completely different story. The proposed tower will be over 40% closer to homes than permitted by the bylaws. It is also much taller than permitted by the bylaws, which state that a tower shall not be 20 feet higher than the tree canopy. Using the applicant's elevation plans, you can see how much taller the tower will be than the surrounding trees, which are about 40 to 75 feet tall. Other towers in town, except one, are camouflaged, which is also required by the bylaws. This is the flagpole tower at the Baker Ave Office Park, which I didn't even recognize as a cell tower. And this is the flagpole tower at the gas station at Route 2. But this is the type of tower with multiple arrays that will loom well above the trees right near our homes. When this application was before the planning board, they agreed that the tower was too tall for the area, and they voted to not recommend waiving the bylaw to increase the tower height, since the board believed that it was a material increase in visual impacts. They also voted unanimously to not recommend granting a waiver of the 1,000-foot home setback, since the board believed that a further investigation into other sites was required. However, the ZBA rejected the planning board's recommendations and approved the application. This case is now in litigation. Living in the overlay district does not mean that a tower can be built right next to you. The town bylaws with height restrictions and setbacks were put in place to protect residents from towers like this. Even though Middlesex owns over 350 acres, a location was selected that was best for them at the expense of their neighbors' health and property values. The red dot is where the tower will be located, which could not be closer to the neighbors. Cities and towns are not powerless when it comes to the Federal Telecommunications Act. Communities preserve their local authority over the location and construction of wireless facilities as long as the decision of the local board does not constitute an effective prohibition of wireless services. Since the application did not meet the criteria for the requested bylaw waivers, the ZBA should have been advised that the application could be denied and refiled by the applicant once a new location was selected. The wireless district was established at town meeting in 1998, and it has been expanded 3 times at town meeting to accommodate cell towers in different parts of town. Passing this article will benefit the school, its neighbors, and the town, because with more options that do not violate the bylaws, the current dispute over the siting of this new tower at Middlesex can be resolved in a way that works for everyone. This article does not require the applicant to relocate the proposed tower, but it will help them do so by opening up more sites. Your support for Article 40 is greatly appreciated.
Thank you very much. We will hear from Select Board Member McCain. No? No? Okay. So the Select Board recommends affirmative action with 2 abstentions on the board. And the Planning Board recommends no action, and I believe they wish to speak? No. Yes? And correction, that's not abstentions, those are recusals because 2 of the Select Board members happen to be abutters.
Robert Easton, 85 Revolutionary Road, member of the Planning Board, speaking on the Planning Board's behalf.
Proceed.
Thank you. The Planning Board goes through a comprehensive process with town staff in the vetting of zoning bylaw amendments and providing a deliberative process for the public to comment on the drafting of amendments. While the existing wireless overlay district may not have provided options for alternative sites as part of a recent application, the Planning Board does support a citizen petition that is not, the Planning Board does not support a citizen petition that has not been vetted and does not provide any in-depth deliberative process for property owners and abutters to review and discuss the proposed amendment, other than at a single public hearing or on the floor of town meeting. The Planning Board is not in support of this process. The Planning Board voted in the majority to recommend no action on Article 40. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is a zoning bylaw amendment. It does require a 2/3 vote, and we'll open the floor to questions and comments. Microphone number 4.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. My name is Matthew Crozier. I live at 108 Barretts Mill Road.
Proceed.
I'm also the Chief Operating Officer of Middlesex School, 1400 Lowell Road, Concord, Mass. Article 40, as has been pointed out, is
Sir, you can pull that microphone
sure.
out of that
Sorry.
stand there if it's giving you grief.
I'm tall like Mr. Easton. Is that better? Thank you. Article 40 is an initiative petition, has been pointed out by a local resident. It has not been proposed by Middlesex School despite the wording of the article. Article 40 seeks to expand the current wireless overlay district to include land on the eastern edge of Middlesex School's campus and the adjoining Middlesex School land in Estabrook Woods. Significant portions of the proposed extension to the wireless district include land either under time-limited or permanent conservation restrictions. And I'd be happy to look at that more on the map if folks would like. Concord currently has 8 wireless overlay districts, one of which already covers a significant portion of our campus. As was pointed out by Ms. Sobral, they were established in the late 90s and early 2000s after careful consideration and study of town's needs. As the last 7 articles have pointed out and shown to the town meeting, the Planning Board works carefully and very deliberately to put together careful language, take in multiple considerations. That was not done in this case. The careful and deliberate work of that town planner, the Director of Planning and Land Management, the Planning Board, and the Zoning Board of Appeals balances the needs of all of Concord residents while helping to ensure that communication public safety infrastructure is available to all. This article has not been proposed with that same deliberative process, and the Planning Board recommends no action, as you heard Mr. Easton, on Article 40. I respectfully ask town meeting to vote no on Article 40.
Thank you very much. We have a clarification question from Town Council for the petitioner. We noted that there is a revised map referenced in the motion that's dated March 1, 2018, but the map that's distributed is dated April 30, and we're wondering which one you mean to refer to.
This map was created for us from the town planner's office, so in terms of the dates being different, this I suppose should be updated to include the date that Elizabeth Hughes had done for this one.
We'll see if Elizabeth can help us with the dates.
Madam Moderator, so the petitioner had included a self-drawn map with their filing of the petition article. It was then asked that town staff prepare a GIS map, which is consistent with our current wireless overlay map and our zoning maps. The first iteration of that map had the same date on that map as the petitioner had on the map that they filed with the town clerk. It was then noticed that the April 30th date was going to be after town meeting. It was recommended that the map be amended to have a March 1st date, a date prior to the planning board's public hearing, which was on March 6th. That map was created. There's different versions. So the date on the map was recommended to be March 1st prior to the planning board's public hearing of March 6th.
Okay, so council, what do you suggest here? We're good? Okay, we have clarified that, so we got the right map and the right motion, so we're all good. Further questions and comments? Microphone number 6.
Mark Martinez, 66 Alfred Circle.
Mr. Martinez?
Could we have a just a quick review of it? It sounds like the Middlesex School went through the process, and ultimately the ZBA approved, and now we're hearing that a citizen's petition may be an end run around that process, and as was, now it's not being supported by the planning board. And I guess I just want to find out the sort of the sequence of events that got us to here. And then I would like to speak just for a second on the citizen petition notion, the principle of it.
Okay, we'll stop your clock. Ms. Del Sobral, do you want to address that? Or Ms. Hughes, would you like to address what the process has been?
I'll just add that I would have gone through any process that the planning board had asked for. I mean, I met with them, they never suggested that I hold a public hearing, would have done so at their request and done anything for that. So it's an unfortunate recommendation on their behalf because, again, they were the board that voted to not grant these 2 waivers that were most concerning, to the neighbors.
Thank you. Ms. Hughes?
Madam Moderator, an application was filed by Industrial Tower, which is a tower company, for Middlesex School. Middlesex School, being the property owner, signed that application. That application went through the special permit process, which requires a public recommendation from the planning board to the zoning board of appeals on that application to relocate from the smokestack to the location that was shown on the map. The planning board did not have a unanimous recommendation to the Board of Appeals to deny it. There was a majority recommendation to deny it. It went to the Zoning Board of Appeals. The Zoning Board of Appeals did their public hearing and took in the factual information from the application, town staff. There was a peer review consultant that reviewed the application for the relocated tower on behalf for the town, for the Board of Appeals. And ultimately, the Board of Appeals did vote unanimously as a 3-member board to grant the special permit. That special permit was filed with the town clerk and appealed within the 20-day appeal period and is now pending litigation.
Thank you. So I guess my concern.
Thank you. Microphone number 6.
Thank you. Is, citizens petition, again, my understanding of it is that 10 citizens can sign the petition, bring it before town meeting. And I think that, one of the more important things I heard was, the planning board is emphasizing the need for public hearings on this, multiple public hearings. Sounds like the landowner has done exactly what it was asked to do, and the highest authority, if you will, in the town granted its request, and now it's before litigation. So I guess I'm against having a citizen's petition sort of get its requested relief when the town has followed a process and it's in litigation. I would just ask that the town vote no, allow litigation to take place, and not interfere in that decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 5.
Hi, Sheldon Hines, 74 The Valley Road.
Mr. Hines?
I wanted first to note that the only reason there ever was a cell tower on that tower, on the smokestack, was because of litigation by AT&T that the town lost, and that they never should have been put there to start with. And now we have an action by the ZBA, again, doing something which never should have been done under the current bylaw, and whatever consultant they hired didn't do his job. Now we have still another unfortunate situation where the area in yellow is abutting lots of houses on the border with Carlisle. I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 houses that are 6 lots that it abuts. And I'm wondering whether the petitioner has in mind, based on engineering principles, where the optimal location would be within the yellow area, and whether we should, as the town, allow the potential for, if this suit wins, to have something proposed by the tower company that might be equally bad. I was wondering whether they had considered, the possible misuse of this, of what we might decide here tonight, and make things even worse. Do you know where the optimal site would be within that yellow area? And why didn't you have a more restricted area that wouldn't be within the 1,000 feet of the houses that are there? I'm very curious about that.
I think we have the question, and you'd like to respond. Will you give us your name and address?
Yes, Aram Adurian, 11 Barkus Farm, co-petitioner with Ms. Del Sobral. I think those are very good points. It's important to remember that the article is not abrogating the zoning or planning board procedures. So the zoning bylaws and the planning board review regarding a 1,000-foot setback, regarding all the associated zoning bylaws, remain in force. This article is simply expanding the overlay district. The reason why we need to expand the overlay district, in our view, is because currently the town has asserted, and the tower company has asserted, that the current northern overlay district is completely full. There are no other alternative sites, and the tower company has said, and they've said this at the zoning and planning boards, that in that case, they will, through a variety of processes, demand a waiver of the entire overlay district. So absent expanding the overlay district, we may as well do away with the entire thing, if it is indeed exhausted. So again, if we're against the proliferation of cell towers in Concord, then we urge you to vote yes on this article.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 3.
Thanks. Steve McEwen, 247 Shattuck Road, project
Mr.
manager at the Middlesex School. I am here to speak tonight just further along the process and to establish what Elizabeth already spoke upon. The Middlesex School was not the applicant for the application that is within litigation that went through zoning, planning, and a lot of other town processes, including Natural Resource Commission. As Mr. Crozier touched on earlier and briefly, the area that's been outlined in yellow has a lot of natural resource in perpetuity restrictions, as well as time restrictions for development. It's interesting that the zoning bylaw would be expanded upon, and without the consideration of the private landowners' planning process, which takes respect to the town's process. And so just to further, it's easy to look at a map and throw a dart at where something should go. The school has careful planning that goes with it, follows the school's process. The school has a process, a board of trustees follows the town's process, along with the planning board, zoning board, Natural Resource Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 1.
Yeah, Thomas Lage, 38 Shore Drive. I'm having a little trouble understanding what this is all about, but let me say what I think I understand, and that is that the current position of the new proposed antenna has to be within that blue square because that's established by some regulation or law, this overlay district.
Correct.
And that the property owners are proposing expanding this district so that the cell tower can be in a different place and go within the town's bylaws requiring a 1,000-foot setback from property owners. Is that correct?
Right. It would open up the yellow parcel for siting of the cell tower.
Now, is the town in charge of establishing these overlay districts? Is that something that's in the town's purview, or is that something established by the state? And is that a zoning board thing, or is that a town bylaw thing? Or?
It came before the town meeting in 1999, and it's been expanded 3 times before town meeting.
And, Ms. Hughes, did you want to address the question of authority to adopt the wireless communications overlay district?
Madam Moderator, the Wireless Communication Overlay District is a zoning overlay district similar to the Floodplain Conservancy District, the Wetlands Conservancy District, and the Groundwater Conservancy District. It is a overlay district established in the town's zoning bylaw, and it is amended, adopted by this legislative body. So that's what tonight's article is about. I would like to clarify the property owner is not the proponent of expanding this. It's a citizen's petition to do that. And then it would be this legislative body makes the decision on whether to make that amendment to the zoning bylaw.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 2.
Thank you. Stephen Bader, 7 River Street. As I understand it, this proposed expansion of the overlay district would provide an opportunity for the Zoning Board of Appeals in a similar situation to not have to grant a variance. In other words, it would give them the opportunity to follow the instructions they were given by this body.
Ms. Delsobral, would you like to respond?
Yes.
Thank you.
Again, we would like this dispute to be settled. Opening up the back fields is something that we're looking for. And if we do win in court, we're going to be back where we are if we don't have more options available to us.
Okay, I see, one more person, microphone number 1.
Matt Johnson, 21 Winthrop Street, member of the planning board, but speaking on my own behalf, as a sort of minority report, if you will.
Mr. Johnson.
So I think one thing that we need to take into account is leaving aside the current whole dispute. What happens when Middlesex School decides, oh, well, we're going to expand dormitories over in the area where now that pole is standing, okay? And now we need to recite yet again. It's already happened once. It could happen again. And we'll be in the same position that we were, and that the planning board, did not like the siting of this cell tower, and in fact, as a majority voted against it, because they said, well, there aren't any alternatives in the current overlay district. When the overlay district was originally set aside, it was all woods back there. Now there are playing fields back there. There's all kinds of development that's happened in the interim. And while there are conservation lands, if you look throughout all of our overlay district, there are conservation lands as well. So it's not something that excludes the ability to define an overlay district. It's an overlay district. So, if we do this now, we will actually be providing for the future. We can leave aside whatever happens in court around the current dispute. They don't have to legally change anything. They've been approved. But when we get to our next application, I'd like to have the land that's available be available for siting and not be in another situation like this.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 5.
Hi, Sheila Sohn, 15 Barkus Farm.
Yes?
Couple questions and clarifications. So this article is just to expand the existing overlay zone that's right now. And it's my understanding if it's passed, there's zero cost to the taxpayers. Is that correct? And
Ms. Del Sobral, you can answer these questions when we have the full list.
Okay. There's no cost to the taxpayers, and it's not required for the school to build, but it's just to expand the possibility of looking at future sites.
Ms. Del Sobral?
Yes, no cost to the taxpayer, and yes, this article is not requiring them to move it to the back of the campus. It's opening up as an option.
Okay, so I'm assuming that this article allows for maybe a more comprehensive look at erecting a cell tower that provides the town with other options and probably could even provide better coverage without costing or impacting the town at all. And moreover, it could result in a cell tower that does not break any of our bylaws. Is that correct? Right. Okay.
So yeah, the back area is about 32 feet higher than the current area, and like we've talked about, the trees have been cut down, so it would be a clear signal.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Just one more point. I think it's also important to know that, for the townspeople to know, that the planning board unanimously rejected this site. And they asked the school to find a different location, and the school said they could not find a suitable spot as there was a wireless overlay restriction. And the Zoning Board of Appeals, excuse me if I'm wrong, but they did not unanimously vote for this. I think it was a 2/3 vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 4.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. It's Matt Crozier, 108 Barretts Mill Road. As a matter of fact, the Zoning Board did not vote unanimously, and the ZBA did vote unanimously. There's a lot of good debate, and I appreciate that. And again, this is part of the process. Middlesex School has followed the process that exists in the town. I respectfully ask for the members of town meeting that are here and the citizens that are here to understand what a private landowner faces when that private landowner has a citizen's petition from 14 residents of one neighborhood seeking to change a substantial portion of the master planning of a private institution. I understand compromises. I understand Mr. Johnson's points from the planning board, but in my opinion and in the opinion of the school and in the opinion as a citizen of the town, it is extremely important for the town to maintain a proper deliberative zoning process so that businesses, whether they be commercial, 501c3 as we are, medical, otherwise, understand the processes when they begin, follow the processes, and then make plans in reliance on those processes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Del Sobral, I think that's okay. We don't need a response to that.
I had an actual question in terms of the planning board's recommendation in the process. If I could ask, what would be the process that they would have envisioned for this?
Well, I think I think we're probably ready for a vote, actually. Okay, oh, sorry, microphone number 6. There you go.
Hi, Alicia Boyajan, 33 Stowe Street. I just wanted to express my support for Article 40 and any solution that might offer the wireless companies an opportunity to expand their service without encroaching on our homes and schools. I believe the plain truth is that there really is a lot of uncertainty about the safety and living close proximity to cell towers. So our town voted in some really reasonable bylaws that protect our homes and our schools, the children and families living here. So I would support anything that might offer future solutions for siting cell towers in a safer way until we have better information from the scientists and researchers that are trying to understand the impacts of living in proximity to cell towers.
Thank you. Microphone number 3.
My name is Shirley Alt, resident of number 9 Barker's Farm. Me and my husband moved
Okay,
to...
I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing you. There you go.
I need to lower it, yeah. So I'm Shirley Alt, number 9 Barker's Farm residence.
Yes,
We moved
proceed.
here with me and my husband moved here 2.5 years ago from Lexington. We select to move to Concord because we love the open space, as somebody mentioned, advantage here. So especially the location. When we moved here, we paid the price without the cell tower next to our house. And we lived in Concord, Lexington before, next to wetland. We bought it when it was wetland, so we sell it when it's wetland. So same thing, right? The economic impact is clear when we bought a house. But this is a situation a little bit, odd to us because we believe Concord is very well-managed town, and the people here are very, very reasonable. Just 2 months ago, I was in a meet the Undersecretary of State Department of Housing and Neighborhood Development. She highly praised the Concord town because we talk about the public housing, we fulfill the requirement, and as Sudbury wasn't. So she even suggested, my colleague lives in Sudbury, say, move to Concord if you want to be a good citizen, blah, blah. I don't want to criticize Concord, Sudbury, but I do want to say that Concord is a very reasonable town. So people here seem to believe the right process was followed, but that's not my experience was. I'm not here to complain what happened, but the overlay was one reason used by the process, say this is the only location they can do. That means move to next to our neighborhood, and even though it's in school property, right? Violate the 3 zoning laws, 1,000 feet, and also serve a certain percentage of Concord residents. Even during the process, the cell company couldn't deny the fact they actually probably serve more residents in Carlisle and Acton. So there are several issues there. I had a big question about that, and I was glad that planning board denied that. But somehow in the zoning board overlay, also the federal law was a reason for the 2 out of 3 member granted their application.
Okay.
That is the process.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay.
You're out of time.
Yeah.
Microphone number 6.
Hi, Carla Macy, 1228 Lowell Road. I just had one statement, which is I firmly agree as well about the unknown dangers of cell towers and keeping those as far away from residences, and obviously dormitories for Middlesex would be great. My question is, just looking at this map here, knowing that a lot of this woods is Estabrook Woods, so it's not owned by the town of Concord, and then also Bateman's Pond is not on here, so I don't know how that relates to the space available, because for me this yellow area looks like a lot of it might be water and also land that's not
Ms. Del Sobral.
Concord. Again, the area that was selected was just the entire parcel 1533, so it doesn't mean that all of the area is where you could put a cell tower, but it's all of the area that Middlesex owns on that side of the street. Does that answer your question? Okay. So again, maybe to answer the other question too, there are fields up there, electricity runs up there, so it's not all Estabrook Woods anymore.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 5.
Tim Rose, 97 Bartlett Hill Road.
Mr. Rose.
I am still confused. I do not understand. Is there something the matter with this area, or is it just the process that was not followed properly that people have a problem? But is this yellow area actually expected to be a bad area for putting a cell tower?
Ms. Hughes, you can address that.
Madam Moderator, the unfortunate answer is don't know. There's been no evaluation of that area. There's been no conversation with the property owner and their plans, no conversation with wireless carriers on whether that location does meet their requirements for coverage, what would be the height of a tower they would need, what would be the visual impacts to other portions of Estherbrook Woods. So the answer is, the planning board does not know because there's been no conversation regarding that.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 3.
Peter Lee, 140 Walden Street.
Mr. Lee.
Question for clarification. I'm also a little confused. Am I correct that if we pass Article 40, it's changing the size of the overlay district, which does not affect this particular tower? It may affect the future siting of a tower, which means not changing the size of this tower, but maybe moving it to a different spot, which might be near other abutters or near other sensitive areas. A question for the town officials. I understand that the ZBA or the zoning board is not supporting this because they have a different process.
It would be the planning board.
The planning
yes.
board, sorry. And is it the intention of the planning board to address this issue if this article is not passed? Because that seems to me maybe the more appropriate process. And if so, what is their goal? Is their goal to expand this district also so that in the future there could be more siting locations? And am I also correct that this will not reduce the number of towers or the height of towers? It's just a matter of positioning.
Would someone from the planning board like to respond?
Madam Moderator, to answer your question, yes, this warrant article would just expand the district. The planning board has not been thinking about expanding just this particular district. Expanding this district will not reduce the number of towers. It will not reduce the height of towers. And whether the planning board were to move forward with an evaluation of the wireless district, they would do it on a town-wide basis. They would not do it on a single property-specific basis.
Thank you very much. I see no one else at a microphone, so I think we're ready for a vote. Article 40 is, as I mentioned, a zoning bylaw amendment, and it does require a 2/3 vote for passage. All those in favor of Article 40, please raise your ballots. All those opposed? Oh dear. Okay, put your ballots down. Let's do this again. You're going to help me. I'm going to help you. Yeah. Let's see. Actually, you know, if I'm not sure, I guess we need your help. You could have a stamp, but it doesn't. Yeah. We should have. Yep. All right, we're going to have to count this, folks. Tellers. I think we might have some tellers out in the cafeteria. And for those of you who are wondering, the Select Board would like to push on this evening. We have 5 articles after this one, and the Select Board would like to push on. Not yet, thank you. Okay, while we're waiting for the tellers to appear, I'm going to go over the procedure for a standing counted vote. We will be closing the doors to the hall, and no one may enter or leave during the vote. Every voter must be occupying a seat, and you can't be counted if you're standing around at the back of the hall. When the tellers come and ask your row to stand, or actually, I'm going to ask you all to stand, and when the tellers come to count your row, they'll let you know when they've done their count and ask you to sit down. And Mr. Fisher, you'll let me know when you are ready. You may. You're ready? Okay. All right, would everyone stand, please? All those in favor of Article 40, please raise your ballot, and the tellers will be coming around.
Only the people who are voting yes should be standing.
Thank you. All those who are voting yes, please stand. If you're not voting yes, have a seat.
But everyone's stretched, so they should be great.
I wonder how long we took here. 46. That was a tough one because I knew I had a majority. I couldn't tell if I had 2/3. No. Well, hi there. He's getting questions about it. Okay. We have counted the votes in favor. We're all ready to count the votes against. Would all those who are opposed to Article 40 please stand and hold your ballot up? Yeah, so if we, right, so if we add the total, you know, if you're not gonna finish everything, there's no point in pressing on, right? So I asked her twice. You know, I understand, there's nothing to do about that though, because you know, on Wednesday night, we never had the motion to stop business after 10.
So we didn't have the motion about when we stop, but we had a motion to resume.
Right, if
Specifically, not say it.
that's right. Right.
Well, she did. People were voting.
Yeah. Yeah.
They aren't in any particular order. Just tell me
Yes,
what,
22.
what section. Yeah, 22. Yep. Okay. Yep. We'll come back to that.
G.
The last one was it's 5, 6, 12. Okay. So now I can total this. Second. Sorry, my fingers are slipping. So that's 144 yes. I'll check it in a second. 126 no. So it's 53% in favor, so that's a fail.
Okay, so give me the count
Sure,
here.
144 yes,
Yep.
126 no.
And what's the percentage?
53.33.
144 yes.
126 no. And at the end of the night, I will get the spreadsheet.
Okay, we're ready with the count. The vote was 144 in favor and 126 against. That is a 53.33% vote in favor. We needed 66.6%, and so the article fails. The Select Board would like to push on this evening, and we have, it's their call. We did not have our motion this evening to take up new business after 10 p.m. Nope, not after 10 p.m. We have 5 articles left. Yes? Microphone number 2, your name and address, sir.
Christian Kruger, 85 Alcott Road.
Yes?
I move to adjourn to 7 p.m. tomorrow. Is it not?
It's true, it's not a point of order, but it is a motion that he can make for the floor while nothing else is pending. Are you seconding, or do you? It has been seconded. Okay, so we have a motion to adjourn, and we have a second. It's never occurred to me to think about whether this is a debatable motion. We're just, you say it's not.
I thought it says amendable. Oh, it is debatable. To dissolve is not to adjourn to fix time unless this appears debatable.
It's debatable. Yep. This is a debatable motion. Does anyone wish to be heard on it? Article 5, I'm sorry, microphone 5.
Thank you. Diane Proctor, 57 Sudbury Road.
Yes.
And I've just taken a vote of the board of the League of Women Voters. I can't do it for the whole league, but I can speak for the board, and that we think that this is an improper process. 10 o'clock, people left because they were told that no new business would be taken up after 10 o'clock. And I can attest to many personal conversations in the back of the room where people said, well, there's going to be no new business and the things about which I'm concerned. And so they left.
Okay.
And so I think we've disenfranchised people, and I think that I would like to speak to the fact that I think that's probably not prudent.
So you're recommending in favor of the
Of the adjournment.
of the motion to adjourn. I do want to just tell you what the preliminary motion was this evening that we voted on, and it was that Ms. Hotchkiss moves that if the meeting does not complete its business tonight, that we adjourn and reconvene to complete the warrant at 7 p.m. tomorrow night. So we did not have a 10 o'clock deadline, but I understand.
Okay.
Microphone number 4.
Could I make a
Craig
point of order?
McDonnell, 800 Old Road in 9 Acre Corner.
Yes.
I think the convention in our town is not to work this late, that people are tired, people have left. The respectful thing to do is to adjourn.
Thank you. Microphone number 5.
I'd like to point out that there was no discussion for that when you said that motion was made. You never said, does anybody have, I noticed that you did not put the 10 o'clock in, but there was no chance unless somebody rushed up to the microphone and said, wait a minute, there's not the 10 o'clock in it. So it was kind of railroaded, I think we used the word.
Microphone number 1.
Abraham Fisher, 400 Hayward Mill Road.
Mr. Fisher.
I'm the head teller, but I'm not speaking in that capacity. I would just like to ask how much it's going to cost the town in dollars for us to continue tomorrow night.
I believe it's about $10,000 in additional rental fee for tomorrow. Have I got that right? Mr. Howell, do I have that about right? You're not sure. Ms. Hodges has it. So there won't be an additional cost for an additional night. The staff, happily for us and unhappily for them, is salaried. Microphone number 4.
Julie O'Brien, 67 MacArthur
Ms.
Road.
O'Brien?
Just like many
people who have kids in this town, we've all been balancing having one person here while the other one's driving around to sports, et cetera. I arrived at 3 minutes to 10 to relieve my husband, and I was not given a ballot. They had closed down. So
Wait, the ballots have closed down?
I was not allowed to check in. They had packed up. So they said because there was no more voting after 10 o'clock, I am holding my husband's ballot. So I don't think you can move on when those things are happening. Thank you.
I think we're ready for a vote. All those in favor of adjourning? Thank you very much. All those opposed? See you tomorrow night.